All right. All right. Go ahead, Lucy.
You're muted, Lucy.
Yeah, you're muted.
I was double muted. How about that? Hey, everybody. Welcome to the show tonight. It's going to be about anti-theism. I'm going to go through and just let everybody introduce themselves, and then we'll kind of talk through what the rules are for the discussions tonight.
Uh-oh. We got an echo.
Uh-oh. You got an echo.
I don't have an echo.
Just let everybody introduce themselves, and then we'll kind of
Yeah, I don't
talk
have one
through.
either. Somebody's got the stream playing in the background.
Yeah.
That was me. I apologize, guys. I messed everything up.
AR is going to get kicked out before we get started.
My headphones are loud enough that I'm going to keep myself muted when I'm not talking, just to make sure that it doesn't get any sort of echo.
No worries. All right, so I'm going to go from my left to right, and on my left, it starts with AR. So AR, introduce yourself.
What's up, guys? I'm the Atheist Rationale. I do live streams tackling religious fundamentalism in the far right. I think I'm coming in here today as one of the only non-anti-theists, so this should be pretty fun. And yeah, that's my introduction.
Awesome. And then we have Ashley, who Ashley is a counterpart to me. We are both moderators, and she's joining us tonight as well. And then Ashley, do you want to say anything?
Oh, I was just going to say, hi guys, I'm a polytheist. I'm actually a Hellenic Reconstructionist, and I also practice some aspects of my native religion. I'm half indigenous, yeah, I came in because I'm curious about your guys' take on anti-theism. I've kind of been watching some of the discussion going on around the topic. I watched Cyrus's stream on it yesterday, and so I'm curious to see where everybody sits.
Awesome. All right, next on my screen is the Disciple of Cairo.
By the way, Lucy, it sounds like you've got like Discord or something coming through, like sounds.
Yeah, I hear that too.
Sounds coming through.
Like notification sounds.
Well, yeah, it's Discord in particular, like when somebody's coming in and out of a room.
Okay, hold on. Let me close out of all my tabs here. Okay.
I heard it again.
Better. I know. I was closing my tabs, y'all.
Oh.
Well, close the other one.
Yeah. What is
Close that one too.
I don't know what's happening right now.
Is it?
I
You're
have to
using your phone
figure out
right
what
now, aren't you?
Well, figure it out as we're talking. You're all right. It's
it's fine.
You know, it's just
I think I got it. It was my Discord app on my laptop that was going off, so it wasn't in my actual tabs. Lord, this is starting off with a bang, isn't it? All right. So,
It's the raging atheist. Oh, they're used to it.
go ahead, Mr. Majors. Introduce yourself.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jim Majors. I am the Disciple of Kairos. You can find me on YouTube, youtube.com/Disciple of Kairos, Kairos. I do biblical criticism and debates, religious debates, and some response videos, and like coming in these streams and talking about anti-theism. I am an anti-theist.
Awesome. Thank you. Then we have John Peterson.
Hey, how you doing, everybody? So I was just thinking about this earlier today. If it wasn't for, and you'll probably hear these words out of my mouth again tomorrow night, but if it wasn't for Steve McRae and this guy here, the Raging Atheist, nobody would even know who the fuck I am. I remember when I started coming in Raging's Hangouts, he didn't know me from a can of paint, and he just accepted me and let me come into his Hangouts, and just want to thank him for that right off the bat. And I started a new channel. I'm just getting ready to put a link to it in the live chat here. Content will be coming within the next week, and it's called the Amateur Conversationalist. And still going to keep doing the weekly streams on the GDC. That's always going to be my main focus, the topic-based panel discussions, but there'll be some one-on-one conversations on my new channel. Thank you.
Awesome. And
Yeah,
then
I do have that link in the description below too, John.
Well, okay, awesome.
cool.
Awesome.
And then
So,
we have Nicholas $400 suitor.
Oh, yep, that's me. And I have a $400 suit on right now. You'll just have to trust me on that. It's amazing that on my first live stream with a $400 suit, the camera also happens to have broken. It's just a coincidence. These things happen. Actually, I was on the Cirrus stream last night. So if you're talking about the anti-theist stream, yeah, that was I was on that, so that was a lot of fun, and glad to be doing this one too. I'm the owner and operator of the Humanist Codex, which is ostensibly, I mean, it's a site for anti-theist arguments and positions, also defenses against common apologetics, and tries to sort of reframe the narrative and the counter argument into something that I think is more productive. But I am nonetheless an anti-theist. I do use that word somewhat differently than most people, but nonetheless, I am reasonably confident I know which side I'm supposed to be on tonight.
Awesome. And then we have Rage himself, Mr. Nocta.
Hey, what's up, guys? Yeah, I am a struggling anti-theist, and I've made some recent videos about it. I've been struggling with my identity and my politics and my anti-theism. So I am really looking forward to having this discussion, and I think I have the right people on for this discussion. And I can't wait to hear where we're going to start and where we're going to end with it. So I'm just really looking forward to it. And real quick, at 10:30 tonight, I'll be on the Leah podcast with Gray Skeptic and Christy Santiago. So come check me out there as well. So
hey,
what's up, y'all?
Lucy, can I say something real quick I forgot about?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, just wanted to say that the Atheist Rationale isn't the only one in the room that doesn't necessarily identify as an anti-theist. There's a lot about anti-theism that I do accept, but there's some things I don't accept. So like I told them before we started the hangout, I plan to be the sock in the room tonight. So that's a little shout out to sock account there.
Gotcha. All righty. Well, some of the rules for tonight will just be basic, have a healthy discussion. Don't be rude and disrespectful to one another. Don't yell over each other where the audience can't hear what is being said. Let the other person finish answering your questions or their argument before you just talk over them. Don't be a dick, and have a healthy discussion. So I did get a question from the chat wanting everyone to define what anti-theism means to them. So I don't know who wants to start off that part of the conversation, but it is a question that's being posed. What is anti-theism to each of you? So that way we can level set what the definition to you guys are.
I nominate Nick. Yeah, I was going to just say I nominate Nick to give that to them.
All right. So if you look up theism in Webster's, there's two definitions. The first is essentially religion, and that's a commonly used version. That is not the version I use. The second one actually is an old British version. It's still, I think, in the Cambridge Encyclopedia of Philosophy, and you'll see it there as theism as opposed to deism. And this is actually the version that Christopher Hitchens used. I think Christopher Hitchens is profoundly misunderstood in terms of exactly what he meant by anti-theism and his obviously radical anti-theism. I am of the Hitchens view, but as it genuinely was, not as it is commonly understood. And what that is to say is that I believe, when I use the word theist, what I mean is someone who believes in a religion that has the three following tenets. One, believes in a higher power. Deism also, of course, falls into that category. Two, believes that higher power interacts with you, knows you exist, interacts with you, and may or may not have things that they instruct of you and want you to do. I have absolutely no problem with either of those first two. If they work for you, great. Good. The third one is the one where I have the problem, and that is that that higher power has empowered you to try to either convince other people to join your religion or to live their lives according to the edicts of that religion, or has empowered you to murder them because they're not doing that, or whatever else. And there are varying degrees of that. But when I refer to theism, it is a religion that has all three of those tenets, and the only one I object to is the third. Once that one's gone, it is no longer a theistic religion, and I honestly couldn't care less. In fact, if it makes you happy, please, by all means, keep it. It's not my job to challenge it. But if it empowers you, or if you believe you are empowered to tell others that what they can eat, who they can love, who they can be with romantically, or anything in between, I believe it is a moral necessity to oppose those beliefs. And when they are enshrouded, or should I say empowered by religion, you are morally obligated to oppose that religion until it removes that third criteria.
And if I could just kind of dovetail off what Nick just said, in that third criteria, I agree that you need to give blowback to that third criteria. But what I would ask Nick is, can't you be against that criteria and endeavor to change those beliefs without being an anti-theist?
It depends. I think, yes, you can, and I think that's why each engagement ends up being unique. But if as it's been defined here, if the belief is that God has empowered me to make these decisions, then unless you separate the I have been empowered by God, and there's only really two ways to do that. One is to convince them that, yes, your religion is correct, but you've misinterpreted it and you are not empowered by God. That's possible. There are thousands of sects of Christianity that are trying to do that to each other, and so on and so forth. Or two is that to undermine the basic religious precepts that they use to claim that warrant. Each situation is different, but for the most part, it's very difficult to have any read. Even the most literal interpretations of many elements of the Bible quite clearly empower them to tell others how to live. And if somebody's going to believe that, I think it's very difficult to dislodge them from those beliefs without having to dislodge them from specifically the belief that they are thus empowered, without dislodging the belief that they feel empowers them.
Okay. So the question I want to ask from your definition, because just so I can kind of have clarity for myself, would you consider paganism to be something to be anti-theist against?
In general, no. I have not met a single paganist that I have been opposed to their beliefs. This is one of the things Ocean and I were talking about, in fact, last night, because when he and I first met, we really had a contention about this view. And then once he realized what I meant by theist, which again is not the common view, but is a used view, and there are philosophical reasons why it would be wise to frame it this way in these discussions. But no, I don't. And there are degrees. So Judaism is a theistic religion, but it is the closest to deism on that scale, because for the most part, Jews do not consider themselves empowered to tell people outside of Judaism how to live. There's a little snark to that. It's because if you're not a Jew, you're not one of God's chosen people, so you can go to hell and do whatever you like. But for whatever the reason, they do not consider themselves thus empowered. They do sometimes, especially when you get into Hasidic Jews, and they do end up having some difficulties where, in particular with women, you have women are not treated, in my opinion, equally, and the women are not given the free ability to sort of leave the religion. And then even though it's members of their own religion, once again, it is theistic enough that I believe one is morally obligated to oppose it.
I think a lot of Christians might argue the point with you, a lot of Christians would argue the point with you about Judaism as far as them being thus empowered when it came to the crucifixion of their Messiah.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, but he wasn't crucified based on Jewish law or canon. And I tend to, for the most part, try, and I'm saying this half snarky, half true, I tend, for the most part, to try to hold the religion accountable for what the people today are doing. I don't always succeed. I've been guilty of saying, well, hey, look, the Crusades, hey, look, history, hey, look. And I hope that when I've done that, it's been appropriate. But nonetheless, I do think you can't really hold the Jewish people accountable for that. But yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm right along. I think me and you are pretty much on the same page when I think of what I am today, and I too have had some of these conversations with not only Ocean but Marty and just a couple of the pagans I've met. It has become a clash, and so when I thought of myself as an anti-theist, I think I was an extreme version of it, because I literally look at the word, and I was against the people and not the idea. And that's what I'm interested in is anti-theism against the people that have these religious beliefs, or is it against the beliefs themselves?
I will point out a lot of pagans would be also against, say, Christianity, and they'd be based against it based on the same grounds that I just gave. So the argument that I often make is, listen, a lot of pagans, a lot of deists are actually, by this definition, anti-theist and are allies to those who oppose that kind of theocracy, for lack of a better word.
Hey, Nakasuchi, tongue-in-cheek, what you just said sounds an awful lot like hate the sin, not the sinner.
Yeah, well, I've been having clashes with my own just personality. I really want to stop attacking people, and I want to stop being mad at people. Or just I don't know, and it goes with politics too. I'm really trying to discover my humanism and where that fits with my anti-theism. And just who I'm changing into, because I'm definitely not the person that was angry as I was when I started this channel. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation tonight. And that's why I'm glad to have Jim and Nick on, who have, very strong ideas of the knowledge behind this.
Can I jump in a little bit? Because you mentioned allyship with pagans, and this is an argument that one of my closest friends has been nearly a lifelong atheist. His parents were philosophers, and he is very much on the more extreme end of anti-theism, mostly because he doesn't like the anti-science attitudes that permeate parts of the pagan community, of which I am certainly not. Like the particular organization that I'm a part of, Hellenion, very much advocates for like scholarship and historical accuracy, and believes that that like science and stuff was gifted to us by the gods for a reason, which we can get into. But like, I think that atheists and most pagan organizations, there are obviously some cults that don't fit this, have a lot more in common than either of us do with the hegemonic like Judeo-Christianic religions. And so in that regard, by Nicholas's definition, I would probably consider myself an anti-theist as well. Like, our group does not proselytize. If people find their way to us, that's kind of what the purpose of us being there is. Like, hey, if you find your way to us, we'll help you, do the things that you would like to do in order to connect. I think that there's an important divide here between orthopraxic religions, of which pagan religions, for the most part, are. Obviously, there are exceptions for things like Hinduism, tend to be less threatening than orthodoxic religions. And I think that that's an important distinguishing factor for me, because the orthodoxic religions tend to be used more often to justify heinous things, at least in the modern day, maybe not in history, but now.
As far as, pardon me, as far as I go, I like I said, I'm an anti-theist. And for me, being an anti-theist means being against dogmatic religion. I'm against pre-established frameworks. I'm against the proliferation and the perpetuation of outdated views of creators of 4,000-year-old legislatures. I am not, however, proactive in that, in eradicating religion. While I do want religion to end, and I do not believe that we need religion, I do believe that that religion provides a net negative. I am not for the forcible removal of churches. I'm not for laws banning worship or religion or prayer or thoughts. But I think that pretty much sums up my definition of anti-theism.
All right. I think I got my turn in now. So, I guess under Nicholas's definition of anti-theism, I'd fit right there. However, I feel his definition is a bit exclusionary, and I know it's being used for the sake of a conversation. However, wanting to be an ally with people with religious beliefs that aren't pushing hatred at all, I can't say I'm. How do I word this? I feel by using an identifier like anti-theist, I couldn't really be an ally towards like pagans like Callan, One Atheist, One Witch in the chat, or Ocean Keltoy. To me, anti-theism implies you're against religion in all of its forms. If you're someone who isn't telling gay people how to live, if you're not saying that trans people don't exist, if you're not trying to perpetuate genocide through your religious beliefs, I'll be right with you. I'm for religious freedom. I believe people can believe whatever they want, just as long as it's not reaching out and hurting anyone, and they're not proselytizing to people that don't want it.
Right, but again, you are only pointing out things that you are against right now, and things that society is against right now. But yeah. I'm against the perpetuation of the idea that this idea is a good idea for all time and not to be questioned.
Yeah, see, and I'm there too. Like that's my struggle, and I've got to have my AC on because it's melting hot in here in Michigan. So hopefully it's not too bad. But like that's been my struggle. Like because I'm with Nick. Like I'm definitely not anti-paganism, but like Yahweh, the idea of Yahweh, I do want to stand in opposition of that spreading anymore, like, so this is where my conflict is coming in, basically for me with anti-theism, because I know I don't stand in opposition with people that I consider allies to my cause, people like Ocean and Marty in the chat, or Callan. I stand in opposition to Abrahamics, and it's the same it's that same idea. I don't want that idea advancing any farther than it already has, because I don't think it's a good idea, and I don't think we should live by it.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but you are for attacking the religion, but you do not attack the religious.
Well, see,
sorry,
my problem has been I've attacked the religious too much, and I want to stop doing that.
Right,
I want to attack the original.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like you are against it. Like you have recognized that you are against that.
Yeah. I don't like that about myself.
Yeah, and for me, that's what anti-theism is.
Well, I think we encounter a number of difficulties right off the bat, because I think these are all excellent questions. The first is, so yeah, I mean, like I have a lot of overhead for my use, the way I use anti-theism, because it does get confused, and then unless somebody actually knows what I mean ahead of time, I'm going to end up, spending a lot of time explaining my terms and getting some blowback from that. On the flip side, there are reasons why I use it that way, and that's a whole nother thing that we can get into, but there are legit reasons for this. But the other thing is, of course, well, what happens when you get somebody who claims to be a Christian but doesn't follow what we personally would consider to be Christian tenets? And because there's no real bar, I mean, I think the bar that one person set was, well, as long as you believe in the resurrection of Jesus Christ, you're a Christian. But you get into sort of no true Scotsman, no true Christian. I agree with Jim very much. I think it's almost impossible, the way Christianity and the Abrahamics in general are set up. It's very hard to separate the person from these sort of these theistic beliefs where they are imposing their religion on others, because it's almost built into the religion. Even if they say they're Christian, if they're not doing this, they're abandoning some of what seem to be the central tenets of Christianity. So I think it's a good question to try to determine at what point is a person's views, they identify as Christian, but when is it a problem? When isn't it? When do you oppose it? When don't you? It becomes murky. Please.
Yeah, because I wrote myself a note to bring this up, and it kind of fits in with what you're saying. When it comes to Christians, you know, as you or someone else pointed out earlier, there's, I mean, what is there, like 10,000 sects of Christianity, and you know, even within the you know, different denominations of Christianity, there's you know, different opinions and beliefs on, you know, what's the proper way to be a Christian. I've often said that it's, you know, it's a good thing that the majority of Christians do not take their morality from the Bible. You know, so when you talk about the more hateful things in the Old Testament, you know, the killing of homosexuals and, you know, slavery and, you know, all the nonsense that's in the Old Testament, a lot of Christians will say, well, no, I'm part of a new covenant. You know, we don't go by the Old Testament anymore, and it's all about the love of Christ. And what I say that is that luckily for us, most Christians base their morality on secular values. They're not basing it on the Bible.
But are they able to change any of those views, like in their framework, in their belief system, whatever it may be, whatever style of Christianity it is, or not Christianity? Do they claim that there are certain ideas or principles that should not be questioned, like morality or faith belief?
Well, yeah. I mean,
well, and that is a problem, I think.
Well, right, but it depends on what that dogmatic thinking entails.
Nope, it doesn't matter. I mean, no. Dogmatic thinking is bad. Period.
Okay, but the thing is
that dogmatic? Is that dogmatic, Jim? When you say that?
No, it's not.
But look, if their dogmatic thinking does not entail harming other people and telling other people how to live their lives, which some Christians are like that, then how is that harmful?
Right. Well, because understand, right? The perpetuation of it and the proliferation of it, allowing it to go on and allowing the sanctity of it to remain intact, you then wind up with slavery being justified for 3,000, 4,000-year-old Bronze Age ideology of the creators of these religions, right? Because they are not to be questioned, because they are dogmatic. What once was good can once become society's detriment.
So what you're saying is that even though there are those people out there that are part of Christianity or part of Islam or any other religion that don't buy into the hatefulness and the judgmentalness and, you know, wanting to kill people that are going against the tenets of, you're saying that they still provide cover for the rest of the people in Christianity?
Of course they do. Of course they do. They still believe it's bad. They still believe it's a sin.
Well, no, there are denominations of Christianity out there that accept homosexual people into their.
Okay, sure, that's fine. But any other dogmatic belief that they have, even ones that are acceptable to society now, are still bad because they are dogmatic. Because one day those ideas will not conform to society.
Well, maybe here's the way I look at it, because there's another interesting thing which I think John gave credit where maybe I don't think any was due, but I'll grant some on another side, which is, you know, okay, well, hey, the Christians who believe in the New Covenant aren't doing all these terrible things. Two things with that. First of all, New Covenant ideology is actually reasonably, New Covenant theology is reasonably new. And it was sort of a response. I mean, everyone knows that, you know, Jesus talks about a covenant and all these, but how it works and how it actually extricates them from Mosaic law is a reasonably new interpretation. And the last crusade ended actually about 250 years ago, if I remember correctly. And Bertrand Russell had said something to the effect of, and I've forgotten the quote, but, you know, never allow the modern Christian to forget that or to take credit for all of the advances in Christianity, because those advances have come solely through the hard work of anti-theists and atheists who have pushed back against those previous beliefs, and that the reason they don't have those extreme beliefs now isn't because they are moderate, but because they were forced to moderate by other people. And I think that the fact that our government, for example, has separation of church and state, and if you take a look at what the effect of that has been, it's been to moderate these extreme beliefs. And my hope is that we can continue to moderate that way so long as we do have a separation of.
Right. And views in the Bible not only just affect the society that you live in, but they also affect the society and the relationships that you have with other societies. For example, Revelation has caused problems with us in foreign relations just because of what's in Revelation.
Oh, yes.
Like, I mean, here's the thing. Here's the thing, Nick. Like, I would take exception to just one term you used when you said that the work of anti-theists and atheists, forced them to adopt these new ideas. I don't know if I would use the word forced. I think that it's like I think that what it is they were exposed to new ideas, and what they ended up doing is they adopted like a secular morality into their religion. They won't admit that, but that's what happened. They adopted the accepted norms within society, I think is what happened.
Well, you have a few different types of people, but the two main groups, I believe, are the people who recognize the immorality in these commands and in these dictations, and they abandon them, or they make excuses for them, apologize for them. Then you have people who apologize for them in different ways, in which they say that they're justified and they adopt these beliefs themselves. Yeah. Either way, the belief of them, or the problem is with these dogmatic religions, is that these principles are written down, and they're copied, and they are the most widely sown book in some cases. It's a sold book, not sown book. And
I'm going to interrupt.
Sure.
No, please finish, and then I want to give the actual quote, because John makes a good point. But why don't you please finish, and I'll give the quote, because I found
That's all. Go ahead, man.
All right. So, John, I think you're absolutely right. I did that quote very, very poorly. It was from memory, and it was obviously very poor. So the actual quote is, and I like this quote very much, and I think it applies. It's no credit to the Orthodox that they do not now believe all the absurdities that were believed 150 years ago. The gradual emasculation of the Christian doctrine has been effected in spite of the most vigorous resistance, and solely as the result of the onslaught of free thinkers, which I do like the way that's put. I don't know if, John, you find that somewhat more palatable, but that was certainly much better put than the way I phrased it. But I do agree with you, John.
Well, to use one issue today, just to give you just really easy connection. The whole reason that gay marriage is illegal in so many states and is so
legal in every state,
so denigrated, is because 4,000 years ago somebody said, "Hey, I don't like that."
Well, and by the way, no, it's not. It is still illegal. Sodomy is still illegal in a number of states. So is gay marriage. Now, because of the supremacy clause, you can't hit anybody with it. But the truth of the matter is, if I'm in Texas, the Texas state constitution says I can't run for office. Well, I can run.
Right. But what I'm saying is that we don't know these people. We don't know, we don't know anybody between them and us, and we don't even know if we're related. We have no real connection to them, right? Other than through this book. But and that is good enough for us to give it the most authoritative power that possible. If we say this is not only good, but this is objectively good and ultimately good.
Yeah, sorry for my AC. I'm in complete agreement with Jim and Nick here. The thing that I find most dangerous about Christianity is that it pretty much makes people that love you, they can't really love you anymore once you become an atheist. And that's why I was always anti-theist, is because the reactions I had from my family, and they still love me or pretend to anyway, but you can tell the change. They're programmed to hate you the moment that you come out against their God. And, they might tolerate you well. They're the really great ones, but they have those thoughts. Oh, there goes my atheist kid, you can hear it in their voice, just the oozing disdain, and you get tired of that shit,
Yeah, but I do want to add to that. But I mean, any belief that we have is programmed, right? But it's whether or not that belief is programmed with the ability to change that belief, or how easy it is to get out of that programming once it's presented with better programming that does the job in a more efficient manner. And whenever
Right.
and with religion, even things that can be done and provide the same outcome, software that gets the same job done but doesn't give you a virus, they will hang on to the software with the virus because they simply believe that this software is the only software.
Hey, real quick, I need to interject something to do with the live chat. There's some questions in there, and I just want to let everybody know that the things that you're not allowed to do in the live chat is to be bigoted. That includes racism, homophobia, transphobia, and you're not allowed to make overt threats of violence. Okay. Other than that, other. What's that?
I said also ableism. I called somebody out for using the R slur earlier.
Oh, the R. Yeah, right. Yeah, that's a rule on this channel too. Thank you, Ashley. But other than that, feel free to post what you want. And just a word to mods. I mean, if somebody is insulting or wants to, preach their dogma, Knock doesn't want that stuff deleted, but definitely delete them for bigotry and violence and the word that Ashley referred to.
Yeah, absolutely. And Atheist AR has been trying to chime in for a little while, so I wanted to interject to give him the mic.
You're muted, AR.
Still muted.
I didn't do it.
I didn't do it either. He doesn't have it. Oh, wait. One more time. There you go. Try it. Nope, nothing.
Yeah. Something happened with your connection.
I wonder if something's going on with your mic, AR.
Yeah, check your sound settings, man.
By the way, I agree with most of the points that you've raised about dogmatism, and particularly dogmatism as it relates to theocracy. I think that particularly with the laws, like people in the chat were talking about how these laws are still on the book because they're effectively toothless. However, we're starting to see with the current administration, which regardless of your current political beliefs, if you are, anti-theist and you're looking at these sort of proposals that they're talking about trying to reverse abortion on biblical grounds, things of that nature, there is very much a theocratic bent to some of the things that they're doing. If, for example, the Supreme Court gets stacked in the favor of theists in that regard, at any time, those sorts of court cases could be overturned. And that's what they're attempting to do with abortion right now. So regardless of your feelings on that particular issue, one could argue that as far as it relates to our conversation, it is possible at any time, if these laws are still in the books, for them to no longer become toothless. And that is very much a concern for those of us who don't believe in the theology that's being espoused here.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. Yeah, I know we refer to gay marriage as the law of the land now, but it's very fragile, and the states do have their own rights. And we all know where the direction this country's taken. They're attacking Roe v. Wade. They're going to be attacking that Supreme Court decision. You can believe it.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Hey, we can hear you now.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Every once in a while, my mic will just cut out. I think it's a problem with OBS mostly. That or my shoddy fucking USB drives or whatever. Anyways, if I'm allowed to
go for it, man.
Say what I was trying to say earlier. Now, I'll agree with you that Christianity in its current form has and continues to cause a lot of harm in society right now. But I do want to make a few points. I don't believe that we can justify full-on anti-theism with just the way that Christianity and perhaps the way Islam is perpetrated in certain foreign countries. That being said, one thing that you'll notice is that religion seems to evolve with the society that's around it. And the further we progress as a society, religion seems to, Christianity itself seems to progress with it. We've noticed several changes in the Bible. We've noticed the rise in Christian churches.
Up. Oh, there you go.
We've noticed a rise in Christian churches that are starting to accept trans people and any segment of the LGBTQ community. Now, yes, it's still hatred against those marginalized groups is still a huge problem, but we have to acknowledge the changes that are happening within Christian churches right now as well. And what's it called? And if we remember that it seemed even the Bible actually, even the Bible seems to have been edited to multiple times in order to
Conform to
Well,
their ideology.
Yes, conform to the society around it. Sorry. I have autism, so I'll have like speaking mistakes here and there.
Oh, you're good.
I
So-
speak, so I have speaking mistakes too.
Oh, dude, same here. I always say like that's my favorite word.
It's a great word.
I think
It's a
John
perfect time
Peterson
killer
had
when you're trying to
something he
think.
wanted to say in regards to what AR just said.
Well, I mean, no. If somebody wants to dovetail off what he said, what I wanted to say was to respond to somebody in chat at the point they
Oh,
brought up.
okay. Gotcha.
Well, to respond to AR, you definitely saw this in history. Again, I know that we're mostly focusing on nowadays, but everybody knows about the Catholic sort of adoption of a whole bunch of pagan gods as saints, effectively, in order to conform to those various societies and make conversion easier. And you do see some of that in the modern day. I think that there's a lot less of it in certain segments of at least the United States and certain parts of Europe, though Europe is significantly less religious than we are over here. So I think there is some hope, but I don't think that it's wise to discount the level of negative influence. I think that if
I'm not trying to discount it. I'm just trying to say that there's some changes taking place, at least now in with the progression of society, the way it's going right now.
Oh, and very
Obviously,
much
there's
so.
a lot of problems with Christianity right now, especially like you guys were mentioning, the stuff happening in Alabama, aka Talabama. But
well, and there's also a line in the Bible that talks about, leave unto Caesar what is Caesar's, effectively, that God put the rulers in place for a reason. And so, like, there is some level of justification for Christianity sort of adopting some of the secular ideals within their text themselves, though there's justification in that book for almost any belief you could ever want. I do think I agree with you that if somebody is atheist, in the same way as the first two propositions that Nicholas talked about, and happens to be Christian or Muslim and wants to be an ally in breaking down the theocratic sort of hold that those religions have over society. I think those individuals are rare, but I don't think we should turn down their help. I mean, especially because they might be able to speak to those communities in some ways better than we can. And I think
may I read a very short poem? It's by Langston Hughes, written in the 1920s. That really is a really revealing poem. It's really short.
Please.
Okay.
I mean, no, Jim. Nobody wants to hear your poem. Who's next?
The ivory gods and the ebony gods and the gods of diamond and jade sit silently on their temple shelves while the people are afraid. Yet the ivory gods and the ebony gods and the gods of diamond jade are only silly puppet gods that the people themselves have made.
Nice.
Nice.
I did want to ask you a question, but please finish, and I'll ask you.
Go ahead.
Well, no. So so you had seemed to suggest, if I understand correctly, really you're opposed to all dogmatic belief. So I guess I'd have a couple of questions, but the one I'd start with, would that include then, for example, paganist beliefs and or then what most people would call deistic beliefs? So beliefs in kind of a higher power, but not even necessarily one that interacts with us or knows we exist.
I have no problem with beliefs in a higher power. I have problems with beliefs in a higher power that cannot or should not be questioned.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
So in that regard, then I was just going to say, in that regard, then my orthodoxic versus orthopraxic, you would agree to a certain extent that orthopraxic beliefs tend to be less damaging.
What's up, IQ?
Hey, how's it going?
Hey.
So
I think there was a question, although I'm not sure who it was directed to.
It was directed at Disciple.
Oh, I'm sorry. What was the question?
I said, would you agree then that orthopraxic beliefs as a whole, obviously not every single sect of every orthopraxic, but orthopraxic religions tend to be less damaging than orthodoxic ones because of the tending lack of dogmatism within them? You know, again, things like paganism.
Yeah, but that doesn't keep you safe from dogmatism, though. I mean, dogmatism, I don't believe is exclusive to orthodoxy.
Ashley, could you please define orthopraxy for the idiots like myself in the room?
Orthopraxic religions tend to be religions that believe that instead of a particular belief in, say, a text or a very specific ideology, your belief in that religion comes from what you do. So, like in the case of Hellenism, orthopraxy includes, practicing the faith in your home and, making offerings and things to the gods and such.
Right.
We don't have one particular ideology that all Hellenists ascribe to, one particular set of myths, even one particular stance on whether or not the myths are, literal or not, though my particular organization states that they're all parables, effectively. So that's my definition for this conversation of orthopraxic versus orthodoxic religions have a particular set of beliefs you must ascribe to, Christianity being, the belief in Jesus as Messiah, everybody's sins being forgiven, etc., baptism, that sort of thing.
But
just to clear up, John, because I don't want there to be any confusion. Nobody really. I appreciate that you asked that. Nobody thought you were an idiot because you didn't know. We all think you're an idiot for entirely different reasons.
Yeah. So I want to point out that even as far as the orthopraxic religions go, I mean, some Christian sects could be seen as orthopraxic, in that they interpret the Bible in a different way. They don't believe that anything has a real. So they basically give their morals. They prescribe their own morals essentially. But the problem is when you prescribe something and you prescribe it with, this is the only medicine, you don't take anything else, and you have to take this to get whatever desired outcome. That's still dogmatism, and that does exist outside of the orthopraxic Christian sects as well in other religions.
Hey, can I get to this point that somebody brought up in the chat, because I'd like everybody to offer some blowback for this point. Victor E in the chat said a few minutes ago that everybody in this room sounds like they're trying to say that we need to stop Christians because they're the ones that are harming society. He claims that Christians are not the ones in charge. That it is Satanists and Luciferian Freemasons that are in charge. I'm surprised he didn't say the Jews too. But
he's clearly not watching this video. He's got to be watching something else.
Well, and then the thing is now he is totally ignoring the fact that, like what Nick said earlier, there's a certain stigma attached to atheists. In some states, atheists can't hold office. And I would say that the vast majority of people in office are Christians, or if they're not Christians, they're of one of the Abrahamic religions. So, but the majority of them are vastly Christians that are in charge in all levels of government, local, state, and federal. So this idea that it's these minorities of Satanists and Luciferian Freemasons that are the ones that are having the most effect on, the rules of society. I mean, it's just nonsense. But,
yeah, I think he also thinks that it's funny how those people also seem to think that America is a Christian nation, yet it's run by Satan. What?
I would like to point out that earlier in the chat, this individual also claimed that anybody who does not believe in Christianity must automatically be a Satanist. So they're coming from that point of view when they're making these appeals to conspiracy.
Oh, God.
But okay, there are two things. So first of all, 95% of all members of Congress throughout history, mayors and governors in this entire country have been Christians. So I would have some objection to how he characterized that. But the other thing, and this dovetails with something that Jim had said earlier, because I hadn't picked up on it, and I was thinking about it now. Christian Zionists and people who do use their beliefs to inform their politics. George W. Bush was one, so was Reagan. But George W. Bush told, what's his name at the time? Was it Macron? No, whoever, head of France, that one of the reasons he was going into Iraq was because Gog and Magog were doing work there, and he thought he was living in the end times. He's not the first president to think he's living in the end times. Mm-hmm. And if you think you're living in the end times, there's a couple problems. One, there's no reason to try to build a sustainable society. Just go spend, don't save for your kids' education. Don't, try to, cure any diseases or anything like that. We're all going to get wiped out anyway. And the other thing is, you may be incentivized to actually try to bring it out, for example, by encouraging Israel to build more settlements on Palestinian land, knowing that Jesus cannot come back until a war starts there. And those are other examples of people who run this country, who are Christian, and certainly they don't have my warrant to do any of these things.
Oh,
but
we give so much support to Israel, and so much. Gosh, it's ridiculous. Like how many things that we fund for Israel. How much food is taking out of hungry children here in the United States and given to Israel.
Hey, real quick, Nick, Victor E. in response to your claim that 95% of people that have held those offices you mentioned were Christians, Victor E. says wrong. They claim to be Christians.
That's a good argument, and that actually brings up two other ones. So I saw another complaint earlier too, which is, why are there no real anti-theists on this panel? Well, if the real anti-theist position is that I am concerned about rationality and I want everybody to be rational, then you have to realize, it sounds to me like the positions of the anti-theists on this panel is more rational than that of those who sit there and say, I'm going to attack all irrational behavior, as if, by the way, A, you could remove it, and B, it's the source of all suffering in this world. It isn't. If I snapped my fingers and religion was gone, there would still be a lot of people who oppose research into global warming and people who don't understand it. So I think it's a big deal. I don't think it's everything, but this is a no true Scotsman argument, and it's always true. I mean,
can I point out another
speaking of end times
statement? There's a gatekeeping fallacy there as well. Like no true Scotsman in his, well, they're not real Christians.
Yeah, it's a defense mechanism.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that qualifies, as far as I understand, somebody to claim that they are Christian is if they believe in Jesus Christ as Messiah coming back to save people from their sins. Now, how far you go from there when it comes to things like baptism and such depends on your sect. I've heard of sects that don't even believe that baptism is absolutely necessary in order to receive the Holy Spirit, that belief is enough if you don't have access to baptism. So, I mean, anything beyond that specific thing, you can't say that somebody's claiming or not claiming to be a Christian. You can say that they're, that they are not a Christian as per your particular branch of Christianity. They are not the same branch as you, but you can't say they're not Christian.
Well, there's actually, and to give the number from earlier, the Catholic Encyclopedia lists 55,000 sects of Christianity. Now, that's a little unfair because it defines a sect by any church which does not necessarily which does not mingle its funds with another sect. Well, that's 55,000.
Yes.
In terms of
subsets, those are subsets of Christianity. Christianity is not a subset of them.
But the number of mutually excommunicative sects, which is to say Catholics and Protestants, sects that say, if you do not believe in us, you are going to hell, and we excommunicate those who do not have the same beliefs we do. That's 3,000. That is 3,000 different sects, all of which believe that the other sects are going to hell, which is to say that most Christians think that most Christians are going to hell.
Hey,
I don't think that it's fair to say all of the sects believe that all the other sects are going to hell. I think that there are a number of them that intersect with one another. Like evangelicals, certain branches of evangelicalism are more accepting than others in particular. But I think that it is fair to say quite a number of the more extremist ones do believe that one another are going to hell. I grew up in a church that I left that did not believe that, for example, like Jehovah's Witnesses were going to hell. They just believed that they added additional praxis that was not, that our church did not believe in.
Well, I should say aren't saved, and that's the Exculum nulla salus, outside of the church there is no salvation. I mean, that's a sort of a central tenet of most of them. Going to hell, you're right, is probably a bit of whether there's purgatory or not. That's the other thing. I think most of them say you're not saved, but that's because they don't want to say that other Christians are going to hell. But if you're not saved, unless there's purgatory, which has now, as I understand it, no longer exists, that means you're going to hell.
Well, and that's fair to say. I just don't think that that all of those various Christian sects think all the others are going to hell except for their particular church. I think there's a number of churches that don't believe that. Oh,
I agree. I'm just saying there's 3,000 mutually excommunicative. So there's 55,000 sects, but of those, only 3,000 are excommunicative of the other sects. But that's still a huge number. And since the largest church is the Catholic Church, and they say if you are not Catholic, you are not saved. And then you take Protestant, Baptist, Anabaptist, Lutheran, those all have the same beliefs. It takes a while before you get to a church of any significant size that says, even if you don't believe in us, you can be saved.
How many? But how many of those Christians, like as far as beliefs go, how many of them believe that you can pray to God for forgiveness no matter what crime that you do, and it's just kind of like a blank check that they can fill out for any amount, and they can pay for whatever atrocities that they've committed, right? And how many of them think that that in order to be saved, that you have to believe in God?
If it's been a while since I've looked at those, but I think for the most part, the only one that says you can be redeemed simply by asking for forgiveness is Catholicism. Although I think with like Southern Baptist, as long as you say you have to say the sinner's prayer. You have to say it all the time, and if you say that and mean that, even if you haven't done any, so if you fail to say the sinner's prayer, even if you haven't committed sins, you're also going to hell. It gets complicated. It's
pretty prevalent, and it's pretty prevalent amongst Protestant sects.
Yeah, a number of Protestant sects believe that you have to genuinely repent in your heart, which often, that's very nebulous, but it often means you have to actually feel bad and not want to do that thing again in order for God to actually give you forgiveness. That if you just pay lip service to it, you're not going to get forgiven.
Well, no, I get that, but I'm talking about even with that, it also entails the belief. Like you have to have the belief. It might be belief plus, but it starts at belief.
That's fair.
I was just gonna, I guess we're done with Victor. There was a bunch of things I wanted to say, but I feel like that train is.
It's okay.
I think we can go back. I don't think anyone's married to moving forward.
I think you could.
Victor is clearly
said without.
Victor's clearly not a real Christian, so we don't have to take anything he says.
Oh.
And I think we can go back to where he said that without Christians, atheists would not have careers.
Oh God! Hey, without Christians, I would happily be unemployed. Yes, good. Yes, I am happy to hear that.
Without
every Christian, have careers.
I love every Christian that comes and watches me. Please,
that's pretty funny. That's pretty funny because I've worked at jobs with other people who identified as atheists, and not all of them are on YouTube. So
hey, wait a minute.
Without Christians, maybe charities would actually do something.
I have a career.
When it comes to
what?
I just
said
want to point
without
out
Christians,
that there's
maybe charities would actually do something.
Well,
take a look. I was at St. Peter's.
Let me offer some blowback to that. Okay, there was a time in my life, even though when I was an atheist, I was in a really bad position in life, and if it wasn't for the help that I got from the Catholic Church in my area, I don't know what would have happened to me. I mean, they kept me fed, and I will say this: not once did they require me to sit and listen to a sermon or go to a Bible study or anything. I showed up at their door, at their pantry, and they kept me fed for a whole summer when I had nowhere else to turn. So I would say that like we talked about last week, there's absolutely, charity could be handled on the secular level, but I don't want to totally disregard charity that religious people have done and do. I mean, and I just said do. But the fact is that it's a good point. Like if they're requiring something out of it, like I do know, like they have like different, shelters and stuff where if you go to the shelter, you do have to participate in, in some, go to a sermon or Bible study or things like that. But
I was homeless for a period of time, and they forced me to go to church, and that's not something I agree with.
Well, and John, if you're gonna be reasonable, John, I think we need to kick you out of the room because there's no place for reasonable arguments or supporting it. And I think you're done here. Thank you, John.
Hey, Victor, if we're being run by Lucifer and Luciferians and his minions, then why don't the churches pay taxes?
Yeah. Hey, the other thing is too is I've said too is that when it comes to the charity that churches provide, oftentimes it's the people that go to the church that are doing it, and if the church disappeared tomorrow, those people would still be charitable to their fellow man.
Yes. And I guarantee you most of those people are not tithing because they believe they're going to go to hell if they don't. I guarantee it.
And I think it gets complicated.
They are tithing.
They are tithing because they don't want to. Yeah. I think that is one thing, because I've seen a lot of the religious give 10% more, I think, or 10 points more than atheists in general. I've heard that number a lot. And I was like, yeah, but how many of them are either required to because they're Mormon or do because they don't want to go to hell? One of the most bizarre and just profound and shaking experiences of my life was when I was in Rome, went to the Vatican, and went to St. Peter's. Do it. It's worth it. It's worth it because it's also just a human marvel, and you can look at what people did without any modern equipment, and it is staggering. And I've got a meme made out of it, a picture that I took. But if you take a look at how big it is and how, and I have to believe it would be hard to build now, and they built this thing, but then you realize just how much money went into it, and you take a look at everything is gilded in gold. And everything, and I'm sitting there going, they do good work. They do donate to charity, but it's a little just almost nauseating to see how much self-indulgence there is. And you sit there and say, I thought God loved his fellow man, and that's where the money should go. I have trouble with some of those arguments when you've seen something like that.
Hey guys, can we respond to somebody in the chat really quick? Gary Moore asks, have you worked out whether anti-theist is anti-religion, anti-religious, or anti-God?
I want to point something out that he's just a troll from a Dragnot server.
What the fuck?
I'm aware of that, but I think it could be an interesting discussion for those who don't, for those in the chat who may be less aware, Victor, of like what position we're actually taking. You haven't been listening closely enough.
AR, that was not cool, man.
What?
Because you're divulging shit from the inside chat. I don't like that.
Was that something I wasn't supposed to say? Nobody told me I shouldn't.
Well, okay. So the
I'm not saying you weren't supposed to say it. But just
people who have come in later might need a refresher on sort of the I guess definition of anti-theist that we agreed on earlier, or that many of us did.
Well, we touched on it again earlier anyway, which was, I think if you're talking about rational thought and, then I think it's actually irrational to say that you're going to try to obliterate all irrational behavior everywhere, and you're going to start with religion. I don't think that's a rational thought. So if the idea is, hey, we don't have any strong anti-theists here because nobody is rational enough to try to oppose all irrational belief, that strikes me as a little silly. But
I don't think that that's what anti-theism is.
I agree, but that's what some people, I think I had seen in the chat, someone earlier said there are no actual anti-theists here, and I think that person was saying
Victor again.
Okay, so I think that complaint is, look, anti-theism is really just opposing all religion and ostensibly on the grounds that it's irrational. Well, I think you got problems with that position.
Victor, that's how it started, because
that all pastors are like reptilians or some crap. So
honestly, I think that's how anti-theism
definition we came up with late to the chat, and the actual definition we all agree on. Can I get updated on the anti-theist?
It's essentially anti-dogma or hateful dogma and anti-proselytization.
Well, like Nicholas sort of articulated it really, really well in Cyrus's stream last night and earlier. Nicholas, correct me if I'm misrepresenting your words at all, but effectively, he said that he was fine if you believe in a god, you know, and that you believe that they can interact with you. But if you then use that belief to extend to yourself the power to alter other people's lives in any way, whether through proselytization or through, like, you know, lawmaking or, you know, judgment or whatever else, then at that point, that is where he starts to draw the line, and he's anti-theist.
Yep, that's. I think that's good.
Yeah, it's not so much that I don't feel that it's rational to think, and I agree that if to eradicate all irrational behavior, because there will be idiots. It doesn't matter if it's on the basis of a god or not. There are people out there that will do stupid shit. And whether or not I think that all bad behavior stems from religion would also be irrational because of that. When you are against a god, like I don't believe in any gods. I know people who do believe in a god that are totally cool. Take Ocean, for instance. He's pretty much in our community, he's a fucking saint, right? But he's a theist. He's a polytheist. But he doesn't make everybody else feel like a piece of shit. He makes everybody else feel like another person. So
for what it's worth, Inquisitive, by the way, you were missing at the beginning of the panel. I am also a polytheist, but I'm a Hellenist rather than practicing heathenism.
Okay.
And I'm in the same position as Ocean on a number of these things.
Gotcha. See, and that's the thing. The polytheist, I've had more polytheists that I can sit down and have a rational conversation with than any Abrahamic theist. Because almost immediately an Abrahamic theist just goes straight out in the fucking left field and they say something absolutely insane. And it's not just that, okay, they don't have any evidence for this, and how could you believe something that you don't have particular 100% concrete evidence for? No, everybody has to have some sort of confidence in something before they can actually come to a realization. It's just when somebody wants to impose that, wants to make everybody else feel that, and looks down upon everybody else who doesn't share this belief, that's when you start running into problems, right?
Well, and I want to touch on to this is kind of ancillary to it, and this is interesting because I said this in Veritas Voices 2 weeks ago, and I've been told I have a reply waiting for me in Veritas Voices on Sunday to this. But the other problem is when you look at it from philosophy, which is just my background, so that's where I usually start with these things. The problem is all knowledge has to come from one of a couple of different sources, and one of them is induction. And there's deduction, which everybody knows. Some people knows what induction is, but the problem is induction cannot be rationally justified, and it's our only way of really acquiring new knowledge. And when you start just breaking down what does knowledge really mean, and also and science, the scientific method came about as a result of acknowledging this limitation in proving that you know something. That's actually why science tries to disprove instead of prove. But the problem is if some of the most basic beliefs we have, like for example, my memories are reliable. That because my car started yesterday, it's going to start tomorrow. Some of these are actually faith-based beliefs. They don't feel that way, but they actually are. And if you were to try to remove all faith-based beliefs, nobody could function. The goal in my mind is to reduce it to the absolute minimum number of faith-based beliefs that you have to have, and that all of us need to have, or we can't function without. And then past that, if people have additional ones, well, look, again, I have them too. The question is my goal to reduce it to the minimum number. I don't think everybody has to do that. I feel compelled to do that for myself, and I don't have to impose that on anyone else. The second I say, oh my God, you've got an irrational belief and you should be operating on the bare bones minimum, I don't think that's true. Again, it's when you use those irrational beliefs to justify controlling other people.
Yeah, it's because you can't know everything.
Yep.
Yeah, it's impossible to eliminate all other options because you have no idea what you're ignorant to. So yeah,
very good way to put it.
Yeah, I agree with that there.
Well, and therefore it all becomes just sort of it all becomes kind of, playing the odds and saying what are the degrees of certainty I have, And I think I try to operate within the highest degree of certainty, and as long as nobody's causing harm, I don't really care how they justify it. But again, that's why I think you have to be very careful saying I'm going to eradicate all irrational belief. You're gonna actually, if you approach that purely rationally, you're going to have some very serious problems pretty quickly.
Indeed, it's not so much what you believe; it's what's the potential harm of your beliefs.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter what you attribute that belief to. If somebody believes something that can bring somebody harm, but they do not adhere to that harm because they believe that their beliefs cover them and it will not bring them any harm, that's dangerous.
And by the way, we have to cause harm.
An immediate. It doesn't have to be an immediate danger, though. Even it can be an infinitely possible danger if that belief is dogmatic and meant to be not questioned.
And by the way, we have to cause harm. When you throw somebody in jail, you are causing harm. You are limiting their freedom. Now, when we do that, when the government steps in and says, "Okay, you're going to pay your taxes. Okay, you're going to do these things," okay, we are imposing the kind of rules that I'm saying I'm very much opposed to. But the difference is we are not using warrant from something that cannot be demonstrated, cannot be tested, and that people haven't had a say in. We're in a democracy, we're in a republic, so people have been involved in the process and we've come to rules. And it's still not perfect, but it's still very different than the warrantless, at least in an externally objective way, a warrantless, hey, my God says kissing is bad, boys kissing is bad, these two boys are kissing, so I am empowered to interfere, even make them feel bad about it, whatever it is, stone them, but anywhere in that spectrum is unacceptable and must be opposed.
Right, because you can act within the law. You can cause somebody harm. You can oppress somebody within the law. You can just walk up to them and say, "Hey, what you're doing is disgusting, and you're going to hell," and that's awful. And while it does nothing for them, right? You being gay does not harm them or their salvation in any way. But how much harm are they causing them that is real harm, right? You're not harming a belief. You're causing real harm.
Yeah, but that's where the Abrahamics get a little fuzzy, because a lot of them say, well, if you see somebody else doing something that could potentially send them to hell, you need to intervene and you need to, and that's where it starts to get, that's where it's just a real problem.
Well, and not even doing things that are bad, just that bad thing can just be not believing. You can be the greatest person in the world and be a non-believer, and they will still feel the need to tell you that you're going to burn for eternity.
But then the atheist or the anti-theist who then says, well, you're irrational, so now I have to jump on you, even if your beliefs aren't hurting anyone, is doing the exact same thing. They're doing the exact same thing. So I don't see how the strong anti-theist view can be rationally defended.
Yeah, and I'm going to jump in so I can turn my air conditioner back on. And this has been the crux of my a look at myself and where I want to be and what kind of human being I want to be. Do I want to be an anti-theist? And I have a problem with the terminology, I think. And it's because I agree. I think me and you, Nick, are the exact same kind of anti-theist, and we believe pretty much the same things along those lines. But I just can't fundamentally call myself an anti-theist anymore, because I think that the term implies that we're against all religions. And even if we're not, Christians and are going to say that about us. So for me, I'm definitely in opposition to Abrahamics. So I'm just going to start labeling myself as anti-Abrahamic, I believe, and that way it's a much more nuanced label, to where instead of saying, hey, I am against all theology, no, I'm pretty much in opposition to Abrahamics for reasons everybody knows about me by now.
But here's what's going to happen, and because the labels are going to be a problem. And Ocean and Cirrus last night said they're working on their own labels to sort of describe what we're discussing right
yeah, and
now.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
You're absolutely correct that it does imply things to people who don't know how I'm using it. It absolutely implies things I do not wish to imply. But let's take a look at what you've just said. Okay, so people are going to sit there and say, what's your problem with Abrahamics? And you're going to say, well, actually, so what specifically is your problem with this particular God? And you're going to eventually, in a discussion, be reduced to the fact, well, no, it's not the belief, it's not the God, it is the oppressive nature of it. So
Nick, guess what, guys? I'm the Antichrist. Did you guys know that?
So,
yes, I've known that for
there's
quite
somebody-
some time, Jim. This isn't
Why didn't you tell
breaking
me?
news.
That makes
This
a
is
lot
not-
of
Nicholas?
sense. It makes
Yeah.
a lot of
Oh, this makes so much
So,
sense.
question: would it be fair to say then that we would be anti-Abrahamic hegemony and anti-theocracy? I mean, obviously, there's a social component as well, but I think that that's broad enough. Like almost all of what we've talked about has been both legal and social ramifications for a lot of these beliefs. The sort of hate that is spread by them.
and I don't want to be like hateful towards Christianity. Like, see, one of the questions that I wrote down that I want to ask of everybody at some point is like, if Christianity becomes a marginalized part of our community, so if it becomes a persecuted minority in America in the future, in our lifetimes, would you stand for their equality like we would for the equality of the peoples we fight for today? You know, and my answer is absolutely yes. I don't want to hate people. You know, I don't want to promote hatred of human beings, but I am fundamentally against pretty much all of Abrahamics. Like, I think it's all foolish. I think it's dumb. And as I said earlier, it and everybody has said it causes actual harm. And I don't mind taking a couple hours to tell people why I have a problem with it, you know, but I don't want to imply with anything that I'm using for myself as like, oh, I'm against you as a human being because you're a Christian.
That's the slippery slope with the kind of mash in between freedom from religion and freedom of religion. Because for freedom from religion, we're talking about we can't have any theists holding office, making laws, because that counteracts with people who don't want to have to abide by that. Now, hear me out for a second here. When you have freedom of religion, they deserve that right to hold office and practice what they want, where they want, how they want. And this also includes people being out in the open, being subjected to or not being subjected to things that they don't believe in. And that's a real slippery slope when it comes to freedom, because it's never really truly free. Because if if your freedom is defined by what you're subjected to, that really kills a lot of other freedoms, because that just means you want your way. And you can't define freedom that way, because you have to be able to let people do what they're doing without it affecting you. Now, people making laws, holding offices, that affects everybody. And that's not freedom from religion. Making it to where people can't practice what they want to practice, that's not freedom of religion.
Would that be fair then to say that we would be anti-religious hegemony? Because that's kind of where I put my line. Hegemony, it can be very specifically applied to government, but it can also be applied broader to sort of that social pressure that a dominant group can exert over other groups.
I like that definition. I think because you had asked earlier, and I would agree that is a very good working definition. I think one reason I'd be personally for myself slow to adopt it is because, again, when the other thing is I'm going to have troubles no matter which definition I use, but when I say anti-theist, at least everybody in the room knows what my agenda is, which I don't plan on hiding. And if I don't tell people what it is ahead of time, they feel ambushed when I start questioning them on particular beliefs. So, again, anti-theism, while not Dawkins had said this. So Dawkins was in a sort of a round table discussion, and someone asked him what his beliefs were, and he said he was agnostic. And the room just flipped out, and they said, well, wait a minute, we thought you were an atheist, and then you've also said anti-theist. And there was a minister there, and he said, no, you said anti-theist, and you've said it here, and then you've said atheist here. Why is it you can't maintain the same position? And he said something which Hillary Clinton got lambasted for saying, but is completely true, which is that you know, you actually do sometimes change the words based on your audience and how you think they view those words and what it is you're trying to mean and what it is you're trying to convey. Words don't necessarily mean the same things in all contexts. So for that context, agnostic was because he was advocating for what is sometimes also called lack of beliefism, and that was agnostic was the better way to do it. So I don't always. I don't often identify. I usually say new theist. I don't identify anytime I'm engaging right away. I don't necessarily identify as anti-theist right away. But the nice thing about saying that is then people know what the agenda is and they don't come surprised if we start having a discussion on certain topics.
Hey, Jim Majors, by the way, Victor E's rationalization in the chat is that you aren't the Antichrist, but that you are Antichrist.
Oh, don't try to retract it now.
Yeah.
Look, okay, I know I wasn't supposed to go public with it. I probably shouldn't have let it come up, but you could send me an email or something. Don't do it while I'm on a live stream.
Well, and this sounds like equivocation to me. I call fallacy. I'm definitely calling fallacy on this one.
I agree because, the point of being anti-religious hegemony, which all of us have agreed, currently Christianity is the religion that is most directly affecting, as far as I understand, everybody who is sitting in this room in terms of hegemonic domination and social oppression. But if you were to go into parts of the Middle East or even into, parts of other countries for a long time in Ireland, this happened with Catholicism. When you go to the Middle East, you look at Muslims, in Israel, there are problems with Judaic sort of exclusion of the Muslim populace and the Arab populace, from what I understand. I may be using the wrong term here, but there are problems with religions overall. The Abrahamic ones tend to be the dominant ones, so we talk about them the most. But there are problems with religions controlling how people function in their lives all over the world. And it's not just Christianity. Christianity is just the largest religion currently, and the one with the most social power in the country in which all of us are operating from. So would that be fair to say? Because I don't think that most of us are specifically anti-Christian. I think that we're anti-Abrahamic as a whole, just because that Abrahamic sort of umbrella is the one that is causing a lot of the pain in the world. But if you were to start talking about, say, the Hindu oppression in in India or parts of Bangladesh where it's illegal to be an atheist and you could be executed for it, I have a friend who lives there who's scared to death. He's trying to emigrate out here because he's scared that if he gets discovered that he'll be killed. That's a problem no matter what faith you're a part of.
Yeah, we can talk about the Saudi invasion of Yemen and the famine there, and just I'm against more than just Christianity. I'm against just the atrocities that these things produce, and so I think I'm right there with Jim a lot too, that I do see it as dangerous. It is proven to be dangerous, and I know AR was making a good point. I do think Christianity has progressed a lot better than Islam. But
that's only because
at the same time, I see the potential
mostly in these progressive societies.
It seems like Christianity right now, a good chunk of Christianity right now, is trying to slip back instead of progress forward. So I'm against these things that I find dangerous and that I rage against. But at the same time, I am having this conflict. That's why I've been quiet for most of this conversation. Is I'm just really trying to suck it in and listen to all of your guys' different interpretations of anti-theism and what it means to you, and just how I want to move forward on my channel and as a human being.
Well, if you live in the...
Honestly, same, though I've tried to speak out a couple of times to get overtalked. It happens.
Go ahead, AR.
Yeah, please.
No, what I was saying is I was agreeing with Rage. I've been partially quiet because I've been sucking it up. Look up to you guys. You're extremely knowledgeable, a lot more knowledgeable than me in my current whatever. And just times that I've wanted to speak up, I got kind of talked over, and it's fine. No big deal.
Well, I think we can all agree that Raging Atheist has been sucking a lot, and we certainly appreciate that.
Jesus Christ.
I think it is kind of...
enjoys it.
I, I think I do get asked that question a lot. Well, gee, Nick, why aren't you against all these other religions? And I meme against, and I've written against any other religion that partakes and does these things. But I tell them, look, I'm in the United States. Christianity is by far the dominant religion here. It would be a little silly of me to, preach against, Hinduism or preach against. I mean, I gotta work within the limits. And besides the fact, now if I was born in India, I might be doing other things. But as it is, I'm in the United States.
Right, and that has a lot to do with it. Much like if you're born in a particular country, most chances are that you are going to be of the religion that is most popular in that country. I mean, many of the people that are Christians in this country, if they had been born in India, would probably be Hindu or something else besides.
Well, yeah, I think all of us in this room have probably been affected by Christianity and not other religions.
Oh, definitely.
I've been affected by other religions just because of my heritage and my culture, but I think most of us would clearly say we've been affected negatively by Christianity in this country over other religions.
Ocean actually brings up something kind of important. He said in the chat, there's something to be said about how Christianity and Islam treat other religions as well. And there's huge problems there. Like we have the new IFB, for instance, that claims that there are only two religions and all other religions are satanic in nature or are complete falsehoods, and that these people are oftentimes worthy of death. And I realize that the new IFB is an extreme case, but there's definitely other Christian sects out there that would have a similar approach towards other religions.
Well, and I want to stress the fact that this isn't unique to the Abrahamic religions. I mean, the people here are probably familiar with the sort of ethnic cleansing that's going on in Myanmar, which has been linked to Buddhism, which is incredibly shocking given that it's sort of a religion of peace. But it shows that almost any ideology can be exploited in that way, in the same way that sort of, atheists and stuff are being killed in Bangladesh by Hindus. It's just, again, most of us have been very negatively impacted by Christianity, and because it is so dominant, it's important to speak out against a lot of those dogmatic beliefs and sort of the justifications for them, the apologetics. Like, so for people here who aren't familiar with me, I'm polyamorous. I have 3 partners, and one of them is ex-Catholic. He identifies now as being somewhere on the pagan spectrum. He's not absolutely certain. But his entire family has effectively kicked him out and refuses to acknowledge any of us in our relationship. They give the justification of the whole hate the sin, not the sinner thing, but he is excluded from pretty much everything within his family because he's in this relationship with us, in the hopes that he will come back to Catholicism and, quote, stop his sin, his sinning lifestyle. And something very similar happened to a prior partner of ours who ended up sort of not being able to take it because of how close they were to their family, who, ended up having to go back. So, I mean, it is very damaging on an individual level. And I know that's an appeal to anecdote, but it's so ubiquitous.
Well,
or shunning and things among a number of different Christian sects that you can say that it is a feature of the landscape.
You honestly bring up a good point, because as we know, 95% of Congress is made up of Christians, and oftentimes they'll find ways to pass laws based on their religious beliefs without actually looking for the right words. Yes, admitting it. Like the abortion debate, for instance. Well, honestly, it shouldn't be a debate. Women deserve the right to choose. But oftentimes laws passed against abortion rights have to do with the person's inherent religious beliefs rather than anything else. And they have to somehow disguise it, otherwise they'd be breaking the First Amendment.
Well, and on some level, you can't blame them. I mean, if you're a congressman, you're going to act based on your beliefs, and you're going to legislate on your beliefs. And if you think it's immoral. I can see why a number of them, despite the fact we have separation of church and state, I can see the temptation to say, I must protect, the life of the fetus. I must. So, I mean, it's not to say you necessarily blame them for doing this, but yeah, I think it's a problem.
I'm not. Also, I just want to point out that I don't think like every single member of Congress has that belief. There are plenty of Christians out there that are for choice in the matter, but
I think that most people in Congress that are pro-choice are Christian.
yeah,
I hazard to guess that,
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to say.
If anyone can throw out a couple of points that it was brought up about oppression from Hindus and oppression from Buddhists, and I think those are good points about what to define that you're against. And I think for me, what I've been saying that I'm against for the most part is I'm against extremism. So if you're an extremist Hindu or an extremist Buddhist to the extent that you want to invade other people's lives, or especially if you're trying to kill people on the basis of whether or not they identify as your religion, that's a kind of extremism that I can say that I'm against. Now, that's an extreme example, but I think that it pops up if you're saying that you're anti-extremist. But I don't bar that just to religion. I bar that into politics as well. If your politics are extreme,
really?
Then
sorry.
Yeah, yes, really, I'm against extremist politics too.
Yeah,
I just realized one of my sock. I'm logged in as one of my sock accounts. So.
Oh, okay.
Well, but I object strongly to that example.
I apologize.
I object to that example. You admitted it's an extreme example, and since I am opposed to extremism as well, I object to your example.
Oh, but what? I'm not quite sure.
Half joke, half serious.
I don't know what's happening. Anyway, I want to finish making the point though.
Okay.
So I would be against, an extremist in a Hindu faith that is attempting to do the same kind of thing. That is that, as Ashley put, religious hegemony. I think that that's a good way of putting it, but I think that it also extends into being against a political hegemony that works in the same way. That if your politics are, another example might be like, say, Nazis or some shit. People that are willing to kill people over their politics. I'm going to be against that too for the same reasons. So just to put that out there.
So there's somebody in the chat who's asking to join, and TRA said that he wanted to ask us what our opinion was on it. I think we're getting really full for everybody to be able to participate personally.
Honestly, if you let her in, I'm going to go the fuck at her for her pushing Nazi conspiracy theories. So you might not want to let her in.
Who are we talking about?
Fucking godless.
Well, conspiracy theories?
Yeah, she pushes Great Replacement on the regular, which is originates from not fucking Nazis.
I know I am too above my limit already, but it was I wanted to get Ocean in definitely. So I mean, but rules are something that I want to try to stick by. But like with Godless, we went at each other a little bit and chat, and it's been a better discussion lately. But I would love to get her in a chat, definitely. So maybe my next one, Godless, if you would like to. I'm for it, but I do agree that we are full and we are actually over the new rules that we set when we had our moderator meeting.
If we do decide to do that, I would state that, like, Lucy, you can, since Lucy and John are both moderators as well, I don't know if you'd agree with me, but we'd probably have to, at that point, start, like, doling out who's speaking a little bit more, especially because there's the potential for people to get into arguments with this particular individual, or so it sounds. So if that did happen, then, like, I think we'd have to take a bit more of an active role, or you would, since you were kind of in the mod position at the moment.
Yeah, this has been a pretty easy one to mod. Everybody's been fairly, straightforward and respectful towards one another. But yeah, if we start bringing,
I'll share the video with you, Ocean.
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. I've never seen her argue that kind of thing.
Yeah, if we start bringing people in where there's going to be heavy controversy, it would look a lot different than it has today.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're over the limit, but I would say it would probably definitely be fun if she came in here.
Do we want to take a vote on it then? Like, I'm all for collective democracy.
I think we're just moving forward, but
yeah.
I want the conversation to stay on topic. I know that's what I'm voting for myself.
Yeah, and it won't stay on topic for sure. But given,
Hey, that's fair.
Yeah. So something I was trying to get in a little bit ago and say, like one of the, I agree with a lot of the points of anti-theism and where you should give opposition to bad beliefs and hateful beliefs and all that. But one of the big reasons why, and I've said this before, people here that know me might have remember me saying this, but one of the reasons why I don't identify as an anti-theist is because I only come in contact with atheists online. In the real world, everybody that is close to me, everybody whom I know and love, are all theists, and every one of them doesn't have like these hateful dogmatic beliefs of trying to dictate to people how to live their lives and stuff. But if I would never say to people in my family who are theists that I'm anti-theist, because then I would have to explain to them, well, no, and it wouldn't come off good that, well, no, I'm not saying I'm against you or anything. It's this, that, and the other. So that label of anti-theist, I can't myself use that. I mean,
it's really hard to come across as being anti-theist when many theists, particularly Abrahamic theists, identify themselves with their religion. So if you're against God, you are against them personally, which is kind of a hard thing to chew on when you're a humanist.
Yeah, the people that are like I say, in my family and the people that I know and love, most of them all know that I'm an atheist. Now, they don't act as if they think I hate them just because they believe in God, but they know that I don't believe in God and that there's things about religion that I don't like. I guess I can't see into their mind and know for sure, but from all appearances, we're still cool. So.
But I think there's something to be said for making certain accommodations anyway. I mean, if you respect your family and if you love your family, then you're going to want to make sure that you treat them with respect and they feel respected. So if you have to modify the language accordingly, or I've been in church plenty of times and I know the basic procedures and I can follow them, and I do. The thing that kind of surprises me is when people know I'm an atheist and they say, "Would you mind praying with us?" And I'll say, "Okay, I'll do it. It doesn't mean anything to me, but if you would like, I will absolutely do it." And I do it. And I would have to believe if the roles were reversed, I wouldn't want someone who doesn't believe to do it, because it would, in my mind, cheapen it. But if that's what I'm like, I am happy to. I don't try to cause waves. You know what I mean? So that makes a lot of sense to me, John.
Yeah,
well, I think that's like, I find it strange that somebody would ask you to pray, quote, with them, but I do respect the fact a great deal that you are as polite as you are, when somebody would ask you to do something like that. That's really admirable, actually, because I think there's a lot of people
Pentecostal service once a week.
Well, I mean, like, you guys know I'm not Christian. I'm in, as I said, I'm in the same position as Ocean. I'm a Hellenist rather than being a heathen. But like, when I have a lot of atheist friends, like the vast majority of my friends, funnily enough, are atheist, and some of them get very grumpy and defensive when they see like shrines around my house and things of that nature. And I've actually had somebody openly mock me once for doing that, and it wasn't just them being a jerk. Like they went on this big long rant about their beliefs regarding anti-theism and how they couldn't believe that somebody as rational as me held those beliefs and that sort of thing. And I think that that's a bad look for the community, really, when you treat people that way.
Well, I respect people above all.
For anyone curious to hear Godless Kafir spread her Nazi rhetoric, I probably shouldn't have promoted her. That's where I fucked up right now. But I feel like people are trying to call me out as like some sort of a liar, so I proved it in the chat.
Well, I certainly no one in here. I think everyone in here has loads of respect for you. So nobody.
I'm not saying she's a Nazi either. What I'm saying is she's pushing their ideology.
I've just never seen that, so that's. I'll take a look at that video, but
I've not
I haven't seen her do that before.
either. I'll take a look at it as well, but I am over the limit of what I'm comfortable modding, and I don't want to boot anyone from.
Yeah, I don't want to make this about personal drama.
Lucy says, keep the matches away from the dumpster.
Yeah, well, it's been good. And I told her that I'm having to hang out on Tuesday, and she can have the first seat. So, you know, I have an open channel, and I you know, we did interact, and I would like to have a conversation regardless.
If you guys wanted to keep the matches away from the dumpster, I may not have been the first choice to bring on here, but I appreciate the trust anyway.
By
Wait
the
a
way,
minute,
Kiara, if you still need me, there's about a 99% chance I should be able to mod for you on Tuesday if you'd like me to preside over that one, because it sounds like it might get heated.
Cool. And I don't think so, because I mean, it's been a fair conversation. So, you know, it's been fair. So I think it'll be a fair conversation when she's here. And, you know, mod is God here now. So I would definitely have you as the mod that night if you're open.
Yeah, like I said, there's a pretty darn good chance that I will be. So if you want me to come back on Tuesday, just make sure you send me the time in advance so I can make sure that I keep my schedule open, because meetings and stuff for Collective U.
I will. I'll DM you.
I see how it works now. Now that the ladies are here, I'm third string.
John, please.
I was giving you a break, John.
You've always been third string, John. You've always been third string. It's not a new thing.
Well, and for what it's worth, John, I was supposed to get a phone call from an editing client. Like, he originally asked me to mod today, like he bailed out on me like a couple of hours before the stream. And so, like, he'd already asked Lucy to cover for tonight, since I ended up being predisposed initially and then not.
And y'all kept it crazy easy on me. Like, I've just been able to sit here and listen and enjoy. So
I think it's almost like the threat of moderation keeps everyone in line.
I have a good chance that this one might get monetized.
Yeah, I don't think I've said a single cuss word. Like, I've been trying to be good.
My bad.
I almost did once or twice, and then I was just like, "Oh, wait a minute! Nobody else has done it. Maybe
I'm gonna go back and watch it and see me drop the F-bomb like 14 times."
So just for the sake of addressing this issue, because I think that Godless, like, it's Godless is an interesting person, but what I'm gonna say is, as far as the video that you've posted, I think that's from a really long time ago when she was an Islamophobe, and that's a position that she's since recanted.
Yeah, it's about 4 months ago, and I wasn't aware that she recanted.
It's 4 months ago. I think that's an old video.
Does she still believe in the
she's not
of Western civilization?
She's not an Islamophobe anymore, dude.
Does she still think that Muslims are replacing white people in Europe?
I don't think so.
I hope not.
That's between you and her. What I'm saying is that I was familiar with her back in those days, and I know that since then that she's recanted that position. So.
And we can espouse our own beliefs and say we're going to keep an open mind, you know, and chat with people. Everybody changes, so you know it's
those things that I brought up are Nazi dog whistles.
Well, but here's the thing: the video you're referencing.
Talk with her about it.
The video that you're referencing to, it might have been posted 4 months ago, but that doesn't necessarily mean that whatever hangout it is happened 4 months ago. It could be from years prior, for all you know.
Yeah, I would talk to her. It seems like she's open to conversation, so I would have a dialogue with her. AR
conversation. She's saying, "Oh, I'm going to get that guy one day."
Yeah, I think you kind of.
I just saw that too.
I think you kind of killed the chance of having any productive conversation.
Yeah, well, I would just. I don't know. I know AR sent me that video, and I haven't gotten around to actually checking it out. But I'll check it out myself.
Yeah, I definitely would have checked out the information before, you know, claiming that somebody is, you know, something as horrible as that without, you know, watching it yourself.
I just haven't seen any evidence to determine whether or not she's.
Hey, AR,
she has said several times that she's recanted that position.
Hey, AR, where do you stand on feeding lobster to dogs?
What does that have to do with anything?
This is one of the heavier topics.
Referencing a Godless video, dude.
I'm referencing a Godless video that she just mentioned in the chat.
So do we think we need to kind of get back on topic a little bit?
Yeah, let's get back to Anti-Theism.
It looks like this is going to be potentially discussed on Tuesday, so we'll have to lay down some ground rules then.
To be fair,
we did really good about staying on topic.
To be fair, though, we were talking about anti-godlessness, so
Oh God, John. John down. John down.
I'm sorry.
This
Is
is
this,
why I changed your profile, John.
So,
Wait, did
quick,
John just
one
lose his
quick
mod
question.
privileges on the? Oh yeah, he's not blue anymore. How did that happen?
So quick question, by the way. Is this the person who used to be known as Godless Engineer? I'm just curious. Like, I'm fairly new to this community.
On Twitter, she goes by Godless Kafir, and on YouTube, it's just Godless. And there's a couple of channels she runs.
Oh, okay. I like I said, I'm not as familiar with this individual, so I was just getting context.
Yeah, Godless Engineer is someone else. He's a cool guy, and it's not a no worries.
So we're back on anti-theism, right?
Yes, please. And I want to thank everybody for the super chats. I haven't acknowledged them. I've been paying attention to the conversation. But thank you everyone for your super chats. Agnostic Pagan Mother, $2. I checked and the vid is gone. So I'm not sure. I think that might be the video that AR is linked, but I'm not sure.
So, Ocean, you had mentioned Janism, I think, in the chat. I didn't even realize you were in right away. I when you first came in, when you first came into the Hangout, I'm away from my computer, so I didn't see your icon. I was just like, that voice sounds familiar. I don't know who it is, but I feel like giving him a hard time. But you had mentioned Janism, and you had also talked about extremism. And first of all, I was actually telling a joke because you had said. Or somebody brought up Janism in the chat.Maybe I missed it.
I did not, but I brought up Buddhism and extremism. And that if your religion is taking you to a point of, going to the point of genocide, then yeah, obviously I have a problem with it. And I think that my point was that I think that applies to politics too. And I've made a lot of comparisons between political ideologies and religious ideologies that there's a measured point of reasonableness in holding political opinions, and it gets into a point of extremism. I think that spirituality is very much the same way, that there's a point of extremism that you go to in which you think that you need to eliminate others for disagreeing with you. And there's a line somewhere, and it's before that point, obviously. Where you're going to be like, oh, okay, well, this is a point where we're too extreme. And I think that there's I've made the argument for the term exclusivity tradition, that it's, but I don't, and I think that we discussed yesterday that there's kind of a difficulty with defining that term, though, of like trying to figure out where the line is, because there's a lot of nuance to what constitutes extremism, I think.
So, that's the joke I'd been making earlier. Was you started talking, I'm against extremism, and then you gave these views, and you said, oh, but these are extreme views, and I was like, well, wait a minute, then, these are extreme examples. Examples, and I was like, well, wait a minute, if you're against extremism, and I'm sorry, Ocean, it's checkmate, you just lost, but thanks for playing. And I made the joke a second time. I should have realized the first time when it failed. You shouldn't try it again. But at any rate, so if Janism is a group of people, whose beliefs are quite extreme, I do wonder, and I'm not saying I have an answer to this. I've thought about it on occasion. The problem doesn't come up often enough that I've made it a big deal. But at what point do you say you protect people from their own beliefs if at some point it makes it so that they're having a hard time functioning? And I'm not sure that Janism is a good example of that. I'm not saying it necessarily is, but certainly we do think that the state has a right to protect some children from the beliefs of their parents if, for example, their parents say, no, this cancer medicine will almost certainly save you, but we don't believe in medicine, and that's a death sentence to the child.
That's the question when it gets to I think the most pertinent example, especially within our country, is Jehovah's Witnesses and blood transfusions, right?
I was about to bring that specific example up, especially because one of the people in the community, I believe it's Not Jehovah's Witness, mentioned that he has a fairly extreme disease or something that could have been treated. Was it Not Jehovah, or there was another person? I don't remember who it was. But they mentioned that, if they had not, that they realized that they're probably going to be screwed up forever because they didn't get the proper, treatment when they were younger, that they were denied it.
Well, Well, and I guess that's sort of the question that we haven't addressed, but in my mind is still worth considering: is at what point do you not respect somebody's beliefs because they are either causing harm to themselves or, you know, to their family, which ostensibly, in the case of a parent and child, they have a right to have their family and beliefs within the family. But at some point, you're stepping in and saying, no, we know better and we are going to intercede. And I'm wondering how that's done. I mean, I got some of my own ideas, but I haven't fleshed it out fully.
Well, but you don't have to intervene or be proactive about a belief to disrespect it. And I would argue, what does it mean to disrespect a belief? I mean, because I don't even know what it would mean to disrespect my dog. I mean, maybe if I like peed on him or made him roll over when he didn't want to or something like that, like made him submit when he didn't want to, like maybe that would disrespect him in his eyes, in his culture or whatever. But like, how do you disrespect an idea?
Well, oh, hold on a second. I'm not. How do you disrespect an idea? That's
I think that if you start asserting yourself over it in a way that's unjustified, I think there's a good example of this that's been coming up recently with respect to the construction of a telescope in Hawaii. And it's on a mountain that's considered sacred by the local traditions. And it gets into this idea of respecting an idea and respecting a tradition does come in when you are overriding that group of people by desecrating their sacred area with this construction without any deal being made with them or anything like that. It's like there's been protests about it and so on and such as, and it becomes this kind of a complicated discussion of like, well, who's got the right to construct this or say that it shouldn't be constructed? Is it the people that have been there for thousands of years? Is it the people that or I think 1,000 years, or is it the people that are in control now?
But why?
Right. That becomes the question, right? Of like, if they're going to be saying that it's sacred to their tradition and their religion, is it justified for you to come in and say, no, it's not, and construct on it?
Absolutely.
Why?
It's absolutely for you to say that they are not sacred, because no beliefs are sacred, nor should they be.
So you're just fine. So like putting a oil rig or like a constructing in the middle of sacred grounds it's not a problem for you.
No, I think that's a problem. Yeah.
Well, wait, now that conflicts with what you just said a second ago.
No, how so?
Because you just said that. All right, would you be in favor of the construction of this in the middle of a sacred area or not? Because it seems like you gave two answers that were contradictory.
Well, I would have to have more information. For example, are there alternatives? Right. Why is it being done?
With respect to the idea of the telescope being built, it's because there's not very much light pollution and it's a high elevation point.
So it's like the only place. It's like the only place that they can do it. No,
it's not the only place they can do it. It's the telescopes are built all over the world, right? But
are we talking about any existing archaeological structures or anything like that? Anything of historical significance?
The historical significance is the mountain. The whole damn thing.
Depending upon the level of, or depending upon the benefit that comes from it, right? Can it be achieved in any other way? I'm all about achieving the result with a net positive.
Right. So my perspective would be, look, if you want to make a deal with the tribe in question is saying, look, this is sacred ground. If they say no, don't do it, then it seems to make sense to me to be respectful to the tribe and don't do it, regardless of whether or not there's a legal right to do so.
Right. Well, that would be their land, right? Because like that's
not. I don't know that it is. I think that it's government land. That's where the crisscross
if it's government land and the government doesn't have a deal with them already, a pre-existing deal, then by law, the government can do what the government wants with the government's land, right?
So what comes on? So like, all right, if the government owns the land, and this is an indigenous tribe that has been there for 1,000 years before that government existed in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's where there's a crisscross, is that this mountain has been considered sacred to the point where the only people that are allowed to go to the top of it is essentially a line of kings.
I'm sorry,
They're
what's
allowed to go
sacred?
to the mountain. So this
Is the
mountain
mountain
is
a belief?
the mountain isn't. There's a belief is about the mountain, and the belief
It
is
doesn't.
by
It doesn't.
people that have been
It
in
doesn't
that
matter.
area for a
It doesn't
longer
matter
time.
because it's not the sanctity of the belief. It's the sanctity of the mountain, right? I do believe that
Right,
things can
so
have
this is-
sanctity. I believe that my children are sacred. I believe that love is sacred, right? Those are my beliefs about what is sacred. But I don't believe that beliefs are sacred, right? I mean, unless you can argue that
Right. So
love is a
this is
belief or
where the
whatever, but-
crisscross is coming in, where I'm like, I'm not sure which position you hold, because if you're saying that, yeah, they should be respected, and then you're saying, well, no, they should be overridden, and I'm not quite sure why what the justification is for either of those positions.
Well,
Because it
no,
seems
no.
inconsistent with how you're doing this.
Pointing out that you were saying that
Something
the
also
mountain was sacred. I was just
inconsistent there.
confused on what you were saying was sacred.
Right. So the idea is that this tribe considers this particular mountain in Hawaii sacred, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, the mountain happens to be a great point to build a telescope because of the low light pollution and its elevation closest to the atmosphere. Cool. Now, government owns the land. Tribe has been there for longer than the government. There's a dispute. There's been telescopes that have been built on top of this mountain, but currently there's another one being built, and there's protest because this is further desecration of a sacred site to this particular ethnic group and religion.
Mm-hmm.
It's an indigenous religion. It's been there for a long fucking time. And colonialism has been consistently eschewing their sacred sites. Now, that gets into this is where the question comes in. Is it okay to assert your values over theirs when it comes to the construction of this telescope, regardless of what they are? Say that,
Sounds
let's
like
assume
cultural
that
construction to me.
Right, but so
that's what it sounds like to me too, and I don't think that that's justified. I think that winds up getting into an oppressive structure.
right,
Yeah,
but let's say that they build the telescope, right? That doesn't change, or that doesn't make it not sacred to them. That doesn't change the mountain's sanctity, right?
So the point of the as I explained to you, the function of the sacredness is that the people that are allowed at the top of this mountain is a particular
Mhm.
line of people that are a line of people that are considered sacred to this tradition.
Right.
So when
Are
you're
you
putting
asking if the government should acknowledge the sanctity and adopt it and take that into
not
consideration?
adopt it, but take it into consideration and
Respect
say,
it,
hey,
yeah.
just as an element
Mm-hmm.
of respect that these people have been here for a long fucking time. They still consider this as a sacred site. Putting this building a telescope here is essentially like walking into a church and constructing whatever you want in the middle of it.
Well, let me
Right.
interrupt real quick. Let me interrupt and
Right,
ask a
so-
question because I think I've got an example that might help here. Just and Ocean can tell me whether or not he concurs. But
Sure.
if the U.S. government decided that Arlington National Cemetery, we don't need that space for remains anymore. I mean, it's just remains. There's no life in them. There's no nothing. We're going to tear up Arlington National Cemetery and build a whatever because that's the best place to do it. It seems to me a lot of people in here would sort of oppose that instinctively, but it's the same
Of course,
question.
Right.
They're
There might wind up being some kind of amicable solution of saying, hey, maybe we can exhume the bodies and move them to another site. Some people obviously would be against that and saying, no, Arlington is this particular location is symbolic for specific purposes relating to the Civil War. It used to be Robert E. Lee's house, and the putting of a cemetery there was chosen for specific symbolic reasons. So this is the only place where that cemetery can be, and that bodies should not be exhumed, bodies should not be moved. So the same kind of conversation can then apply to this mountain as well. You can't move the sacredness, right? You can't actually say that what is considered important to this tribe and this location can be moved. It's unmovable because it's a respect to a specific spiritual experience in a location. All right. Now, is it okay to assert again, and this is the crux of the question, is it okay to assert values over them and do what is essentially desecrating their sacred site?
But you're not telling them that they can't believe it, that they can't hold it, that it's sacred, right? It doesn't change the fact that it's sacred, right? You're just
right, but
you would
You're
be
just still
offending
destroying
them.
the land, though.
yeah,
Well, and
you're changing.
if only certain people are allowed onto the top of the mountain, as soon as you say you're putting a telescope up there, you're putting all sorts of people on the mountain who, by
Correct.
these beliefs, are not
That's the
permitted.
contention.
So I guess I'm not understanding what you're asking. Like if you're asking if it's wrong or if it shouldn't be done or should be done
So
or what,
just,
because
to
we're
give
talking
a
about
to give a kind of a
utility.
background. So and this happened. This was something I posted on Twitter recently, and I'll just here, let me actually just read the example because it's pertinent. So
and I'm going to interrupt one more time and be rude, ladies and gentlemen. It has been marvelous. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you for inviting me, and I'm glad I was able to come. But I do need to get going. So
Thank you, Nick,
thank you all.
See you,
for
Nick.
coming.
Bye, Boo. Talk to you later, man.
Talk to you later, bro. Bye.
all right.
Yeah, I was gonna
So-
end at 8. We're gonna go to 8:30, but so please continue.
It's just I can make this point and then I can take off too. But the
Have a good one, by the way, Nick. It was wonderful to get to talk to you.
Thank you. Same.
Take care,
Thank
man.
you. Same here. You too.
somebody posted a video saying, "Hey, on Wednesday there was a armed police force arresting Native Hawaiian elders who were peacefully protesting in order to protect this mountain." It's called, I may be mispronouncing this, but Mauna Kea, from desecration. Now, somebody posted below it, "There's no such thing as desecration since gods and magic do not exist." And then he misspells the name of the mountain as being repurposed to be a window into the cosmos, immeasurably expanding human knowledge and prosperity. The elders and their dark superstitions are done. The telescopes illuminate the future. And my response to this is essentially, look, here is one of the effects of a certain brand of atheism: the disrespectful undermining and scoffing to local indigenous cultures, and the arrogance of feeling self-righteous in doing so. Is there an amicable solution to this issue in Hawaii? Maybe, but it ain't this. And that sums up kind of the argument.
Yeah, I mean
And this has happened recently here in America. The No Dapple protest. They were desecrating sacred land. Sacred land. They would not allow natives to go pray to their ancestors, and they were desecrating this land and then abusing any native that tried to come there to pray. This is a very serious question and one I'm very passionate about.
There's actually, I'd like to add another example from my own tribe. I'm half Haida. That's the indigenous tribe that I'm a part of, or rather that I have ancestry from. There's a big, long, complicated thing. But they did something very similar to us. They basically clear-cut half of Haida Gwaii and gave that as a reservation. And then the other half, where a lot of sacred sites, burial sites, and historical villages were, sold that to logging companies. And there was a huge contention with the Canadian government for a long time over this. And that, I think to a certain degree, this comes back to culturally, even when you look at it from an atheist perspective, there's a certain amount of that comes back from this idea of manifest destiny, which I think is subtly culturally ingrained now, where even people who don't understand, much like Calvinism, where some of these beliefs came from, hold them without realizing why. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I think I'm just processing. I mean, this has been a pretty deep conversation. Besides the little sidetrack part.
This is one of the this is one of the things that I bring up when I'm talking about latent Christianity, is that I think that one of the effects of certain, not all, but certain forms of anti-theism, is that you get this kind of idea where all of a sudden from the perspective of indigenous faiths, the oppression that came from Christians now switches to the same effect from anti-theists, but with a different justification. It switches into, instead of your religion isn't true, or your religion is irrelevant because it's not Christianity, it becomes your religion is irrelevant because it's a religion.
Right, but that's the thing though, right? It's relative to the society. Like, even though that we don't hold it as sacred, like the mountain that you were talking about. That's what I was wanting to say, but before Nick left, the mountain is sacred to them, right? And if somebody knows that it is sacred, then you can take that into account because that's relative to your own whatever, to your own culture. So But that doesn't mean that it's always sacred, right? Or universally or objectively sacred. So in other words, 2,000 years from now, do I have a problem with somebody putting a telescope on there because it was once sacred ground? No, I don't have a problem with that.
I think that if the culture in question changes their position, then then there's definitely that changes the context of the situation, right? So I would agree with you to a certain extent with respect to that kind of context. There's something to be said about historical significance at that point. Should we maintain these kind of sacred sites and so on? And that's become a position of
Right.
yes, in like places like Britain, where they maintain places like Stonehenge and Castlereagh.
Well,
So
this might be just a very crude way of saying it, but I mean, what is sacred to me and to I think most people is what is important to you. And I mean, if you can recognize the importance of something, or if it's important to you, then I believe that's sacred. And you don't have to adopt the same beliefs that they have about its sanctity, or that envelop their reasons for holding it as sacred. You know what I mean?
I think it's
Right.
it's more about
So like your altar, for example, Ocean, your altar. I wouldn't go up to your altar and knock the hearthstone off, or knock oh shit, knock my beer over, or anything like that.
God damn it! Right? No, I understand that there's a respect element there,
It's
right?
sacred to me, right? Because you're my friend, and I love you, and I don't want to disrespect you.
So here's the question: would
I
you
would
be
look
in
at that,
favor
right?
of that telescope being constructed or not? And for me, I'm of the position of like, look, one way of because there's other telescopes that have already been constructed up there. Why not just mod one of the ones that is already there, and then you can prolong this issue for a little bit. But it's a desecration that has already taken place. This is a point of constant contention in this area, by the way, is
Hey,
that
real quick.
because there's already telescopes up there. Go ahead, John.
Well, look, I just wanted to ask Jim to clarify, because he just used the example, and he alluded to what I wanted to say about how, it's whether you respect another person's idea of what is sacred. And then you use the example of, well, you wouldn't just walk up and kick over Ocean's altar, but the thing is now, because you personally know him, he's your friend and everything. But would you, if the person wasn't a personal friend of yours, could you still find a reason to kick over their altar?
I think that the difference is actually a little bit different than that, because my altar is in my house.
Yeah.
Second, and this mountain is not in anybody's house. This mountain.
No, but I'm asking specifically about the example you used, in that, because he said the reasons were that he knows you and he respects you and you're his friend and everything. But if he didn't know the person, then would it be okay for you to kick their altar?
I think we can just skip over this by saying, Jim, do you respect indigenous cultures?
Do I respect what?
Indigenous cultures.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, then all right, that gets around that. Now, then would you respect this indigenous culture's right to say, hey, don't build on our sacred mountain, please?
Okay, well, I mean, I don't think
we
that
first need to define respect.
Me personally,
who's respect.
Right, because it would be a cost-benefit analysis, and I would take into account my analysis and like my understanding of it. And I guess like I don't know what mountain you're talking about, but like for somebody to just go
the largest island in Hawaii. I can give you like a little bit of more specificity.
Okay.
I haven't been saying the name of the mountain because I don't know how to pronounce it.
Analysis on the destruction of somebody's culture.
Well, it's not. You're not destroying a culture. What do you mean destroying the culture?
You're destroying an aspect of the culture by desecrating a sacred site. So the mountain I haven't been saying because I don't know how to pronounce it, but it is Mauna space Kea. So I've been shooting from the hip pronouncing that Mauna Kea.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, you're supposed to pronounce every vowel separately, and that's
Mauna Kea.
Mauna Kea. Like okay, that might be it then. It is the tallest mountain on the largest island in Hawaii. Is the second highest point, I think, in the Pacific Ocean. Maybe on any island in any ocean, but I think that it's the second highest. I know it's the second highest point in the Pacific Ocean. It's been picked for its lack of light pollution. And then it also has this sacred site aspect about it, which is that the only people that are allowed to the top of it traditionally are a specific spiritual tribal leader within this group that has been there for since about 1000 AD, I think, is when they settled. So,
Can I chime in a little bit?
yeah, go for it. I was just trying to explain the situation.
Okay, I wanted to respond a little bit to some of the people in the chat that are kind of having this discussion, because I'm trying to do it over text and it's not very effective. There was somebody in there who said that, you know, there's a burial site where their ancestors were buried that now is a picnic and they don't have a problem with this. And they made the argument that, you know, at some point, every spot on Earth is sacred to someone. But I think that there's a distinction between a culture that currently exists, people that currently exist who still believe in their indigenous, you know, beliefs, that have an issue with desecrating a site that they consider sacred, and an ancient site that some people might have ancestry to, you know, like let's say the Minoan culture, where we don't fully understand what the purpose of it was, and there are no modern practitioners of that faith, or, you know, where the descendants don't fully understand the sacredness of it. I think that there's a very distinct difference between those two things.
Right, because he still believes that that is a burial ground, right? But it's also something else, and it's also something else, and it was also something else. You know what I mean?
Right. So
it can be a telescope, and it can be
a good
sacred ground.
Should we build a telescope on top of Stonehenge?
No.
Okay. Why?
Well, that's a horrible foundation for a telescope.
Let's assume it. Is that your only reason?
Okay, should we build housing or a mall? Like, let's say, should we build housing or a mall on top of Stonehenge?
I could give another smart-ass answer, but I understand what you're trying to say. Well, again, a cost-benefit analysis. Like, what am I benefiting from building it on top of Stonehenge? What will it cost me? You know, for one, Stonehenge is beautiful. I would take its beauty into account, right? My subjective interpretation of it or assessment of it, and that's what sanctity is. It's our own personal perception of it. And if we don't perceive it as sacred, that doesn't mean that it's not sacred for somebody else.
Hey Jim, should we build a church on top of Christopher Hitchens' grave?
He'd burn it down.
No, I'm pretty sure he's probably in a graveyard somewhere. That'd be weird. Well, I know it'd be fitting. I've seen a lot of churches in cemeteries.
Well, maybe we're talking past each other.
Find it really ironic. And
yeah, I think there is some talking past each other, because I think that, like, I keep trying to make the point, and I think that Jim's
if I may, this may
point.
help your point, Ocean.
Go
Jim,
ahead.
Ocean had asked you, do you respect indigenous populations? And being, you know, from what I can see, a respectably nice guy, you're gonna say, well, of course I do. I'm not that much of a dick, you know, to where I'm gonna be like, yeah, kill them all, fuck them, burn them. What does it mean to you when you say you respect indigenous populations? What is it about the indigenous populations that you do respect? Because you seem to be on, you know, desecrating sacred grounds that is sacred to them, but is obviously not sacred to you. So what is it about respect that how are we defining respect, and whose respect, whose line are we going by here?
So of course we're going by mine, right? Because you're asking me. So when you ask me, I'm going to give you my subjective thoughts on it. And when it comes to indigenous tribes, I respect indigenous tribes, or I guess another way would say I appreciate the preservation of these tribes, right? Because there's so much that we can learn from these indigenous tribes, and they are a minority, and they are they are under threat right now. So they do need to be protected. So yes, their preservation is important to me, just because they are, and first and foremost, they're humans.
Indeed,
right?
Yeah,
Jim,
totally
Jim identifies as a humanist, so that's, you know, why his answer doesn't surprise me at all. He's for people. So,
and that's the thing. I'm also 100% behind respecting the people and respecting the quality of the human life. But we're not talking about the humans, right? We're talking about the ground. So it's their ideas that we're disrespecting, and not quite the people, but they identify as those holy grounds or whatever it is that, that is so important to them as part of them. So are we disrespecting the people by disrespecting their ideas? Because I'm behind you respect the people and you do not have to respect the ideas, but they can be one and the same. So when we say something like, do you respect indigenous tribes? Where can we, as humanists and people, and somebody who I can legitimately not call myself a dick, say that I do respect these people?
Can I add one additional point to that? Like, I just want to make one other comment. Being from an indigenous tribe, one of the ways in which genocide has been perpetuated against indigenous peoples, the world over, is through the desecration of sacred sites. It's through building things on top of those. And in a lot of these sorts of cultural and religious structures, having a telescope on top of what is considered to be sacred ground is, sorry, the doorbell in the background. I mentioned they screwed up my food order. I'll have to go for a half sec to go grab it. But like, one of the ways in which our culture has been destroyed in the past is, to put those things on top of where we worship, on top of where we pray. And for a ethnic religion where that sort of, where that sort of thing is important, that is still another way in which we have been oppressed. And so you can't really have a telescope there and still have it be sacred. That is a very specific thing.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Have-
it's to
the
me,
act of putting
it's
a
all
telescope
in.
there on there is desecration of what they consider sacred, and that wouldn't be respecting their culture in any way.
So that
Right. Well,
ties
to,
into
you can't do
to
both.
me, it's
the
all
whole
about
premise of
it's all
our
about your intent
conversation.
behind it, because there's no one thing intrinsically is more valuable than another thing. It's all about what value you apply to it yourself. And so, I mean, it's
there's a culture that applies that value to the mountain.
Hey, real quick,
Yeah.
people, I just want to point out 10-minute warning. Knock wants to wrap.
Exactly. The culture is what applies that. And even though I don't have the belief that those are sacred grounds, as far as a telescope goes, if you were to ask if I would build a telescope on there, then no, I wouldn't. And that's because of my subjective
I wouldn't call it
interpretation
sacred
of
from
what
my
is right
personal
and
view
what is
either.
wrong.
But at the same time, I would respect their right to believe that and keep their culture intact. You know what I mean?
Well, are they a minority? Was there?
I think
or
that
was it because
Jim has
was
just
it
agreed
a
with you.
church once there.
Oh, okay. I must have misheard.
Yeah, he said that no, and I think part of the issue here as well. I'll throw this out there, is that the question comes up of who should be performing the cost benefit analysis. Is it the people who consider this mountain sacred, or is it people who don't consider this mountain sacred? Because I think obviously people are
Right.
going to wind up, if you ask the tribe, they're probably going to say, well, no, you shouldn't do it. And then if you ask people that are, say, heavily invested in the value of this location for their telescope, they're going to say, yes, of course, but sacredness be damned. So, that I think that for me, in my looking at this, I think that the analysis falls more towards leaning to the indigenous tribe of saying, like, look, this is a sacred land for them. You need to deal with them before you build anything there. If they don't want to deal with you in building something there, then tough toodles. You're not building there. But that's not how the law works necessarily. And that's part of the issue around this whole discussion.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
have
I mean,
my
all things
logical
are
side
sacred, and
tells me
nothing is sacred.
I've got a logical side that says, yeah, man, that's a bunch of bullshit. I don't believe in any of that. So why should we not, improve the quality of the entire species by learning about the cosmos? There's a lot more things. Maybe this one telescope isn't going to make or break, our entire scientific community and what we understand about the cosmos, but it's another telescope. I got a logical side that says, you know what, screw it. We need important stuff, and these petty little beliefs are not important. But I've got a humanist side that says, no, these are people, and this is important to them. Is there something that's important to somebody else, or something that's important to me that's not important to somebody else for whatever ideology that they have, that they can just disregard because it's not important to them? And we need to respect people sometimes, and their beliefs. But this opens up a bigger can of worms. We're not just talking about this indigenous tribe. Once you start thinking like that, what other religions grant that same respect to their ideas? And that ties into the entire premise of what we're talking about here is anti-theism. And is that when is it okay to disrespect somebody's beliefs just because it's beliefs?
Well,
doesn't
and
mean
I think
disrespecting
that-
the person.
I really want to respond to that.
Yeah, I just want to say real quick that the sad part about all this is, at the end of the day, much like they've done throughout history, the government's going to do whatever the fuck they want anyway. So
Yeah, and that's part of the issues, because everything that I just explained and what I ended with, that's not how the law works. It tends whether or not something is done is far more dependent on what the law is, rather than this like moral question of whether or not we should be respecting this particular group, because that's just not how the law is structured. We don't take that into consideration in how we've structured our laws. I think that's a problem, but it's the reality of the game that is being played.
Well, I think we do. I think we do, but I think we're always like 5 steps ahead of the law. Like I think the law is always developing in
slowly,
retrospect, right?
Right. Well, this is a criticism of the law as it stands, rather than of the law as it could be. Obviously, the something that I've pointing out, or let's see, a second ago, as far as like where do we draw the line as far as respecting ideas. I think that Nick was making a point on Cyrus and I's show yesterday that it comes into play, like mockery comes into play. Mockery against ideas comes into play when you're dealing with bullies, and then being in opposition to a theistic position comes into play when they're trying to enforce their beliefs upon people that are like outside of a jurisdiction. So I think that with respect to an indigenous tribe that's been there for a long time, we can grant them certain authority over a sacred mountain, but they're not going to be able to tell me what my sexuality can be, for example. I don't know what their beliefs are on that. But say Christians trying to say that I can't express my sexuality in one way or another, or that anybody else can't, that's where I'm going to be having an objection. And that's like an obvious place for an objection.
Yes. Now, to me, it's about intent, right? So for a Christian to be against homosexuality, a homosexual person doing a homosexual act in his home is not doing anything to disrespect the Christian's beliefs. Like that's not disrespectful to the Christian's beliefs, because there's no intent behind it. Now, if they were to switch things up and move to the front church pew and get things on there, then that would be directly disrespectful, right? Because they have intent behind that. There's an intent to disrespect.
Well, if you're talking about them getting it on, wouldn't that be public nudity? And we have laws against that. Nobody just goes out.
Well, regardless of whether we have laws against, that's not what we're talking about.
Yeah, I'm just saying that's not really something people do. But I understand.
So I don't know if we lost Lucy, but I'm just going to step in there and grab the reins real quick, because I know Knock has other things coming up tonight. He said he wanted to be done at 8:30. He actually wanted to be done at 8 o'clock originally, but it was going so good, we decided to go another half hour. And there's Lucy back, and I'll hand it over to her to start closing this out.
Hey, yeah, sorry. I was sidetracked by getting called names.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, both of us did, because I stepped in because I was just like, no, like we laid down the law about harassment, you know.
I'm still getting it. She's going to defend flat Earth and make me look stupid. So
if you're gonna troll, at least be better than fucking rice gum.
Go for it.
I have never met a troll like this. I am just. Wow, I mean, you know, but I get fascinated by this stuff. But like, I just want to say that as I put in the chat,
who's she trying to
selected? I think the best mods. I have the great mods, and they have power, and they have power over me. And so yeah, I mean, you can be nice, and you won't get hidden.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I want to point out real quick to people in chat: if a mod times you out and you come back in on a sock account, you're done for the night.
Yeah, okay? I mean, these are all rules that we have talked about, and Lucy has full power, guys. I mean, she's the mod for the night, she's the god for the night. But I'm fascinated with the troll. I mean, everybody here that's watched me for a while knows I have this fascination with trolls, and this is beautiful. I mean, not the shit that she's saying, because it's really, really rude. But I mean, wow. I mean, just sock account after sock. I'm speechless, guys, and that don't happen much.
Here's
Well,
something. I got a question. You know,
Hey, AR,
I'm
after you ask your
noticing
question,
this-
why don't you, after you ask your question, why don't you give your final thoughts and tell people where to find you?
Yeah, we do need to wrap it up, and I just want to put my support for Lucifer. I think she's a great human being, and I have the best mods, and they are always going to have control of these conversations, and that includes in the chats, the live chat. All you have to do is be respectful, and you can conversate. We designed these rules to have more conversation, not less, but be respectful, or you will be timed out.
So if Godless really doesn't espouse these like very obviously white supremacist ideals, and that conversation apparently took place longer than 4 months ago, why is she using a sock account that has that video placed on it currently? Why is she still updating it? And also,
All right, folks, that was a
Yeah, we definitely don't.
That was hold on.
Dude, if you want to take your drama to her personally, you don't need to blast it on this channel, dude. Just
okay, let's
So-
stop that. Give your final thoughts on the topic at hand so we can get moving along because Rach has other things going on.
all right, my final thoughts are we should totally respect people's beliefs, their religion, just as long as it's not out there targeting people for being a member of a marginalized group, such as any segment of the LGBTQ community. We as atheists shouldn't be desecrating holy grounds if there's a culture out there that still believes it to be sacred. And I need to get on your guys' level because I'm like a couple tiers below. And yeah, I'm the Atheist Rationale. I do live streams debunking religious fundamentalism and far right ideology. And you can find me at the Atheist Rationale. Twitter is the Atheist R. And come check me out.
Thank you. All right. Jim Majors, what's your final thoughts of the night?
Final thoughts. Thank you for having me. Thank you for moderating, Lucy. And I guess I would just say that you don't need religion to be good, and you don't need religion for anything. Anything that religion provides, you can find outside of religion without all of the negative baggage that comes with religion. I believe that religion is destructive, and I believe that dogmatic thinking is self-destructive to your own self. Know why you believe what you believe. Don't just assume that any belief that you have is a truth that should not be questioned. If you have a belief that you think should not be questioned, then that belief is most likely in very much need of assessment. I'm Jim Majors, the disciple of Kairos. Check me out on YouTube. I do debates and biblical criticism. And thanks again, Raging.
Thank you. All right. John Peterson, you've been quiet all night.
Well, not all night, but yeah, especially when Ocean and Jim were talking, I was fascinated and listening to them, so I stayed muted. I'm John Peterson. As you might know, I do once a week stream on the Great Debate Community channel. Tomorrow night, I'm going to be joined by Jim Majors, Dave McGinnis, Dr. Misha Griffith, and Mike Oliver. And we're going to talk about the latest nonsense out of Trump's Twitter feed this past week and other things related to that. I also just started a new channel called The Amateur Conversationalist, and I will be having some one-on-one conversations on that channel. Hopefully the first episode will be going off this weekend. And that's it. Thanks to Doc for having me, and thanks to Lucy for modding.
Thanks. Ashley, final thoughts?
So my final thoughts are fairly similar to where they were at the beginning. I'm maybe a polytheist, but I'm fairly against religious hegemony and oppression, and also sort of the way that a lot of cultures have been harmed through the destruction of things like sacred sites. I think that there needs to be a lot more care put into some of these discussions, because very frequently these groups are sort of ignored. And I think that the work that is being done by the atheist community is really, really important, both to that end and toward the end of sort of stopping this horrendous exploitation of people and harassment of people by religious figures from happening, like to kind of undo some of that religious programming. And I think that that's really, really important. As far as me, I'm actually sort of more known in leftist circles. I'm frequently a guest on Pig Puncher's channel, and I'm working
That's where I
on
remember you from.
called Collective U.
Sorry.
And in collaboration with a number of other YouTubers, of which TRA said that he might be interested at some point. We still need to talk about it. So we're working on getting our first videos up, but when we do get the first couple of scripts fully animated, because that's the bottleneck at the moment, then you guys will be able to look for me there.
Awesome.
Sorry for interrupting you there. I just got excited because I knew I recognized you from somewhere.
IQ, what's up?
Hey. All right, so I'm Inquisitive Quandary. I'm a recovering idiot, but aren't we all? Primarily a Twitter guy. Just got on there to voice my opinion and try to bring some inspiration to people. Our conversation for the night is a really deep one that is really hard to answer, especially within ourselves, because we all have our opinions and we all think we know what we believe and how we feel about others. And it's really difficult to just come out and say that when most of us aren't asking ourselves the right questions. And having panels like this is really important because perspective really weighs everything out, because you could have like-minded people get together and a slight difference in perspective can really be a game changer when it comes to respecting not only yourself but other people. And that's what it boils down to, is respect, but properly defining that. And properly defining anything is where we need to come together, because we all have to live together. We all don't believe the same things. And when at the end of the day, we need to ask ourselves the right questions. What do I believe and why? And that's where my handle name comes in, is questioning the question and making sure you're answering yourself honestly. And that's about it.
Awesome. Thank you. Ocean.
Hey, I guess my thoughts are very much in line with what Ashley said. Maybe it's because we're both polytheists and have a different kind of angle on this topic as far as anti-theism is concerned. I think that anti-theism is is a term with a lot of uses. It's not a label that I use because I think of similar to what Rage said, that I think that the implications that it gives are things that I disagree with. So, but when you get into people that are willing to take the labor of defining it very specifically, like Nick Suter, I have agreements with a lot of what he's doing. But I don't think that fixes the term necessarily. I don't wind up using it myself, even though I might agree with his label. Cyrus the Skeptic has a very similar label of being against religious harm, is kind of how he defines it. And while I agree with that definition, it's still not a label that I'll use because of the implications that I think the label gives. So, but other than that, as far as like with respect to how things should be applied, and with religious sacred sites and indigenous cultures and stuff, me and Ashley are very much on the same page.
Thank you, Ocean.
Hey, Lucy, I forgot to thank somebody real quick. I just noticed. I want to thank the Raging Atheist audience. I picked up like 10 subs just during the stream by mentioning my channel and posting it in a live chat. You guys are awesome, man. And I mean, I don't even have any content yet. I promise you there'll be something up before the next few days. And just, you guys are great, man. The Raging Atheist audience is like one of the awesomest out there.
Yeah.
And I wanted to shoot a thanks over to Lucifer, by the way. Like, you haven't had to do a ton to keep everybody in order, but thank you for coming in and modding when it wasn't certain that I'd be able to. I really respect you for that. And I hope, I mentioned this in the chat, but I hope I didn't step on your toes too much timing that out. I just wanted to make sure it was clear that, like, you can disagree with us. That's perfectly fine. Just don't go name-calling and harassing and insulting people. Like, at that point, I'm going to step down.
No, I have this rule of thumb. I tend to not ban or time people out when it's an attack against me. I let other people do it because I don't want it to be a personal thing. So you were fine.
Yeah, I missed some of it, and I definitely am going to protect my mods and have my mods back. So don't troll my mods. They're gonna they're gonna win every time. Tampa Seahawk 999 super chat. Thank you so much. Just caught the end. Anti-Theist here. Go back and watch the stream. That was a good one.
Seahawks, woo!
And I wanted to put out there, I kind of got cut off, not by any of you guys. One of my children walked in where I was at the end of this, and I had to silently shush them away. Just wanted to thank everybody, Lucy for modding, Knock for having me on here, and everybody else. I love civil discussions. There hasn't really been anybody in here that caused for a dumpster fire, so I guess nobody really needs to have been attacked on this one. This has been one of the more civil conversations that I've seen on Knox channel, and I see this to be a trend, man. Like you're taking a good turn, and I want to say kudos to you for really thinking of yourself and thinking of your actions. I just want to say good job, and thanks for everybody having me on.
I just want to apologize
thank you
for focusing too much on the chat rage. That was uncool of me to go godless the way I did. Probably should have saved that for a different time. And yeah.
Well, I mean, it's good. Like I think you definitely have an issue that you want to talk with her. Like, find out. And AR, me and you are tight, so no worries. Godless came in and she distracted, and like I said, I'm not trying to have problems with her. The discourse changed, and she's been respectful to me. I didn't see what she a lot. I saw some of it there at the end when I actually started paying attention. And yeah, I mean, if you're gonna be disrespectful to my mods, then they're gonna time you out, and that's, I mean, what
you
I
can
want.
Her if you want, but I hit her right there at the end when she kept going at Lucy after the timeouts on multiple Sonic accounts. Like at that point, I was just like, "You're hidden. He can unhide you if you want, but like I'm not putting up with this anymore. You're harassing me. You're harassing Lucy. This ain't happening."
So, and I'm going to fully support those decisions. Like I said, I'm not even going to look at it. I'm not going to do nothing. It is, it's your channel tonight, Lucy. And I want to, thank IQ for his comments and everybody for coming and talking. And this was the conversation that I wanted. And this is the direction I want to go with the conversations. I'm going to be making my edited videos and I can be crazy me. But in these conversations, it needs to be a place of discourse and not the raging atheist raging. So I just really want to thank everybody, because this is exactly what I wanted this conversation to be, outside of the sidetrack in the chat that happened. I think that we were all on topic, and that's what I want from these conversations. So thank you all so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys for a healthy discussion and being respectful. I hope you guys have a good rest of your night.
Had a great time. Thank you.